meeting to order, but let's do roll call, and then I believe General Manager has some housekeeping stuff.
Sure.
Directors Akbari,
Present.
Gunther,
Here.
Sethi, Weed, and Huang.
Here.
Here for weed. I just unmuted myself.
Oh, sorry.
All right, so I believe, Mr. Shaver, you have some housekeeping issues for us before we move to salute to the flag.
Yes, thank you, President Wong. First, sound check. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good evening. On behalf of the ACWD board, I'd like to welcome the public and staff to this board meeting this evening. My name is Robert Shaver, and I serve as the district's general manager. Members of the public may participate in this public meeting either by using Zoom or by telephone. And I am pleased to report that the district is trying out closed caption functionality for the first time this evening. So to access closed captions, there is a button at the bottom of the screen with some options. If you are participating by Zoom, generally we ask that all participants mute their microphones unless speaking. You may also be placed on mute by the district secretary. The district secretary will unmute participants at the appropriate times when the board is receiving public comments. In Zoom, you will be able to view presentation materials as they are presented to the board. And at any time, you may submit a question or raise your hand if you're muted, and then the board will take your question at the appropriate time. If you're participating by telephone, please put your phone on mute to assure the best sound quality for everyone, and refrain from making comments unless prompted by either the board president or the district secretary. Zoom allows you to use your dial pad, *6 to mute, unmute, and *9 to raise your hand. If you're using Zoom and a phone at the same time, be aware that there can be echo and feedback issues. And if you're on the phone, you may download presentation slides from the district's website at www.acwd.org, and you can follow along that way. This Zoom webinar will be recorded and will be made accessible to the public for future viewing on our website. The board has 2 closed session items that will be covered near the end of the meeting. While the board convenes privately in closed session, members of the public may remain logged into Zoom and be informed of any board reports once the closed session items are concluded. Thank you for attending. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. Next is salute to the flag, please. Director Gunther, would you lead us in a salute?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Next is public comments. Members of the public who wish to address the board on any issues not listed on the agenda, which are within the purview of the Alameda County Water District. A 5 minutes limit is customary. However, the board president may adjust the actual time allotted to accommodate the number of speakers. Members of the public who wish to address the board on a scheduled agenda item will be given the opportunity to do so. So with that, I will open the public comments. Do I have any members of the public that wish to address the board? If you wish.
Yes, Ms. Morgan, but Judy, I don't see the agenda. I don't see the agenda. Can you slide it down? Or maybe it's, I tried to pull it up earlier today, but.
It's just the salute of the flag right now. Yeah.
I believe Ms. Morgan is looking for a copy of the agenda.
Yeah, just.
So,
Is that the agenda? Okay, okay.
Okay, can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay. So, is it my turn to say something?
Yes, Ms. Morgan.
Okay, I couldn't tell if the cattle ranch is in closed session or something I can speak about now, right?
N3 Cattle Ranch is in a closed session, but
Okay.
I believe you could make a comment now, correct?
Okay.
Mr. Miyake, let me clarify with council.
Yes, she can make a public comment now. That would be fine. Or right before we go into closed session.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. So I've said this public comment several times over the last few months. I am really opposed to using ratepayer money to buy a cattle ranch. I do not read anything about, aside from watershed value, the reason for the purchase of this cattle ranch. And I know there are several board members, directors, that are adamantly for this purchase. As a ratepayer, I am not for using my money to buy a cattle ranch. I don't see any value. Nobody in any of the public discussions or league debates has said anything about what the value of this is. If we're going to use it to store water, I don't hear anything about that. But to use my little bit of money to buy whatever it's going to cost us, $60 million to buy a cattle ranch, just because you're worried that some rich billionaire from Silicon Valley is going to buy it, as I've discussed with a board member, and he doesn't seem to be there tonight. I just don't see the value. Nobody's explaining the value to me, and I know this is not the place where you're going to discuss the value, and I know it's in closed session, but there's no transparency about this issue, and I just think it's totally unfair that you would push this down a ratepayer's throat without telling us anything about it, just because it's closed session and a coalition can't be notified, can't be made present or known or anything. I just think it's terrible that you're going to waste ratepayers' money on this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you very much, Ms. Morgan, and thank you for taking the time out to address the board. Do I have any other members of the public that wish to address the board? I see a Mr. Ken N.
Thank you, President Huang. My name is Ken Nishimura. My address is on a matter of public record with the district. The potential purchase of the N3 Ranch has become a topic in the ongoing election for seats on the Board of Directors for Alameda County Water District. Facts and figures have been quoted, and in line with modern day politics, some appear to be erroneous. Given the magnitude of the proposed purchase, I believe the district should post on its public website some facts regarding the Alameda Creek watershed to help the public obtain reliable information to make an informed decision. Specifically, the district should post on its website the total acreage of the Alameda Creek watershed, the total acreage of N3 Ranch, which lies within the Alameda Creek watershed, the fraction of the N3 Ranch acreage which lies within the Alameda Creek watershed, the nature of the water rights which ACWD already possesses, including the seniority of such water rights within the Alameda Creek watershed, the nature of any additional water rights which would inure to ACWD should the district purchase the N3 Ranch, including the seniority of such rights. And finally, the estimated amount of additional water the district could obtain from the purchase of the N3 Ranch. Providing the public with unbiased and factual data is in the interest of the district and the rate-paying public in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nishimura. Do I have any other members of the public that wish to address the board? If you wish to do so, please raise your hand through the Zoom app or speak up. I am not seeing any, so with that, I am going to move on to the consent calendar. Do I have any motions to add items to the consent calendar?
Yes, I will make the motion. So I'll make the motion to add items 5.1, 5.2, 5.4, and 5.6 to the consent calendar.
It's John Weed. I will abstain on item 5.2 as I have recused myself on earlier items for different criteria, but an abstention I think is appropriate for 5.2.
Okay, then Director Akbari, can I convince you to modify your motion?
Absolutely, yes. So I will make the motion to add items 5.1, 5.4, and 5.6 to the consent calendar.
Do I have a second?
I'll go ahead and second.
Okay, do I have a motion for the consent calendar as amended?
I'll move consent calendar as amended.
Director,
Sorry, do we need
Oh,
to vote
sorry.
on the previous
All right.
motion?
Yeah, we have a motion, the second, to amend the calendar. So roll call, please. Sorry.
Directors Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Huang.
Aye. All right. Now that we have taken the vote, do I have a motion to move the consent calendar as amended?
I'll move the consent calendar as amended.
I'll second.
Directors Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Huang.
Aye. All right. With that, it would be item 5.2, and I believe Director Weed. Well, actually, can Director Weed stay? He doesn't need to leave, right? Correct, Council? He just needs to abstain.
If he's going to, it's up to him, but I think he has left the room from prior ones dealing with this particular item.
Right. I'm not in true conflict on this issue, but it would be more in keeping, since I did not vote on the earlier aspects of this. And primarily because of the relationship with, it works as part of the rubber dam number 3, which I do have a conflict with. Previously because of litigation I was involved with, and currently because I have acquired a property in the close proximity to rubber dam number 3. So if departure is appropriate, that's fine. I will ask the host to evict me.
Ms. Markku, can you put Director Weed in the breakout room, please? Thank you.
Yes. Director Weed, can you accept the invite to be moved?
See where that is in there. That's
I get you.
I think I got invited to the breakout room.
I also got invited.
Okay, hold on a second.
So I think all of us that don't want to go to the breakout room should say later, maybe,
Yes.
or hit the X.
It looks like John. It looks like John's not here anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So item 5.2, staff.
So item 5.2 involves authorization of change order for rubber dam number 1, Alameda County Drop Structure Fishway, RD1 control building modifications, and Shin Pond fish screen construction. And Mr. Stevenson, Manager of Engineering and Technology Services, will present this item.
And I'd be happy to read the staff report or just provide a very brief summary or just answer any questions. This is a change order. It's our first change order on this project. We're in year 2 of the project, and this change order covers some demolition work of an abandoned subsurface concrete footing that was unmapped. Some work in the channel having to do with realigning the water diversion structure, the addition of some additional engineered material underneath the Shin outlet structure, and then some grout replacement on the control building basement floor. And staff's recommendation is approved change order number 4 in the amount of $101,458.42 to Flatiron West Incorporated for the rubber dam number 1, Alameda County Drop Structure Fishway, RD1 control building modifications, and Shin Pond fish screens construction project, jobs 21006, 21012, and 21019. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board?
I'll move 5.2.
Hold on. Give
Recommendation.
me just a second. Hold that thought. Any questions or comments from members of our public that wish to address the board on this item? I am not seeing any. All right, Director Gunther, move. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Director Akbari. Roll call, please.
Directors Akbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
and Huang.
Aye. So with that, Ms. Markku, can you bring Director Wee back? And I believe Director Akbari, you have something to read on item 5.3 before
Yes.
we to the breakout room.
Yeah, I have a potential conflict due to a real property interest that falls within about 1,000 feet of item 5.3. and have recused myself on previous items regarding this project. So I'll be recusing myself again tonight, and I think I can move myself to the breakout room. So I will go ahead and do so.
All right, Director Akbari is gone. Is Director Wee back?
Doesn't appear so.
Yeah. So we do need him back. We currently don't have a quorum without him.
Okay, hold on a second here. I'm not sure who iPhone 1 is. So
Director Wee, if you are through your iPhone, can you say hello?
he's in.
Okay.
Let me see who this is. Okay. I think we're good. Yes.
Is he back?
Director Weed is back.
Okay. I am not seeing him on my list, but.
No?
I don't see him, Gina.
Hold on. I see. Hold on one second. I think, hold on here. I think I need to just like close.
He's back.
Oh, okay.
He's muted. John, you're muted.
The trick was you had to go to a full screen. I had a small screen on the side. Once I went to the full screen, then the other sessions popped up.
Well, welcome back from the other side.
Yes, it's a strange journey.
Next time, don't go towards the light.
On that
For the sound of the gunfire.
On that very happy note, let's move on to item 5.3, please.
Certainly, Madam President. Item 5.3 involves a resolution awarding contract for Canyon Heights Booster Station Upgrade Project. And once again, Mr. Stevenson is available to provide a summary or answer questions as you see fit.
So just a very brief summary. This is to replace some aging electrical equipment within the booster station that serves the Canyon Heights and Upper Canyon Heights area. Also involves some reconfiguration of some of the equipment and relocating certain components to cabinets outside the booster station. Also improves access and site safety features. And staff's recommendation is by motion, waive the minor irregularity in the Valentine Corporation bid and adopt a resolution awarding the contract for the Canyon Heights Booster Station Upgrade Project work to Valentine Corporation in the amount of $907,869, job 21267.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Do I have any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, do I have any questions or comments from members of the public on this item? If you wish to address the board on this item, please raise your hand in the Zoom app or just speak up, please. I am seeing and hearing nothing, then I'm going to ask, do I have a motion from the board?
I'll go ahead and move staff recommendation again.
Do I have a second? Director Wee? No? If not, I'll second.
That's fine, I'll second.
I could definitely second too if you don't feel comfortable, Director Wee.
No, second is fine.
Okay. Roll call.
Booster stations are booster stations.
Directors Gunther,
Aye.
Weed,
Aye.
and Huang.
Aye. So now we need to bring Director Akbari back. I know Director Gunther needs to recuse himself on item 5.5, but I believe Director Gunther, you also have a spiel you have to read.
Yeah, I also have a potential conflict of interest in property, and that I live within 1,000 feet of this item of the pipeline installation. So I will be reclusing myself as I have in the past as well and going to the breakout room.
Thank you. Now we'll just ask Ms. Marcoux to do her magic. All right, I see Director Akbari's back and Director Gunther is gone from my screens, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, then let's move on. Let's start on item 5.5, please.
Thank you, Madam President. Item 5.5 involves authorization of change order for Phase 1 of the Alvarado Niles Pipeline Seismic Improvement Project construction. And once again, I suppose Mr. Stevenson will quickly summarize and provide our recommendation.
Absolutely. This is a change order for the Alvarado Niles project, which is part of our main renewal program. The projects are currently under construction, and so some of the typical gremlins pop up during construction, particularly with this type of underground work. This change order covers some changes to the pipe profile that were required as a result of some conflicting utilities, some night work to minimize the impact of customer interruptions during the shelter-in-place orders. Also, some cost to procure some large diameter pipe materials that were requested by the district, so we'd have them on hand for repairs as needed. So let's see, staff's recommendation is by motion, approve change order number 3 in the amount of $199,873.34, and which includes a time extension of 2 calendar days to Garney Pacific Incorporated for the Alvarado Niles Pipeline Seismic Improvement Project, Job 21192. Happy to address any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Any questions or comments from the board?
None.
Director Wee?
No.
No, okay. I'm not hearing any questions or comments from members of the public. If you wish to address the board on this item, please raise your hand or speak up. I'm not seeing any hands in Zoom app or hearing anything. Okay, then do I have a motion from the board?
I'll make the motion to move staff recommendation.
Do I have a second?
I can second that.
All right, thank you, Director Wee. Roll call, please.
Directors Akbari,
Aye.
Wee,
Aye.
and Huang.
Aye. So with that, can we please bring Director Gunther back? Yep, I see Director Gunther pop back in. Right. Okay, yep. All right, with that, let's move on to item 5.7, please.
Thank you, President Wong. Back in September, the board directed staff to come back with a specific proposal. And so item 5.7 involves a resolution updating the Help on Tap program and amending the district's rate and fee schedule. And this item will be presented by Manager of Finance, Jonathan Wunderlich.
All right, thank you, Mr. Shaver. Good evening, board members of the public. I'll go ahead and summarize this issue and provide the staff recommendation. After I do that, I will go ahead and read from an email sent to staff and also President Wong by Director Sethi, who is unable to join us this evening, so everyone is aware of the feedback he has provided. So on September 10th, 2020, the board directed staff to review the financial impact of increasing the Help on Tap benefit amount to $40. Staff has completed that review and determined that the cost of increasing the benefit to $40 bi-monthly is within the budget of the program, even if the number of customers participating in the program increases significantly. Approval of this item will help achieve Strategic Plan Goal 5, communication, promote clear and open communication, outreach, and engagement with customers and communities. So the recommendation is by motion, adopt a resolution amending the district's rate and fee schedule to increase the Help on Tap bi-monthly credit from $25 to $40. And now I'll read from Director Sethi's email. This subject was discussed at our last finance meeting at the end of August. As I said to my fellow board members and staff, I am supportive of whatever the board decides during my absence. I would just couch my affirmation for an increase in the reimbursable fee to say I am more in agreement with President Wong that we should increase this dollar amount slowly and incrementally from $25 to $30 or even maybe $35, understanding the funds that are available to support the program. Even though I know from our finance team we could go up to $40 per billing period, I would discourage that at this time unless there is some strong business case put forward by staff. So that concludes the comments provided by Director Sethi. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions or comments from the board? Any opinion on $35 versus $40?
Is there an accompanying expansion of the eligibility criteria to what we're voting on tonight, or is this simply the credit amount?
So
Oops, sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Wunderlich.
Yeah, it's simply the credit amount.
Okay.
John, do we have, what data, if any, do we have that is available to the public or to the board about the individuals who are taking advantage of the 970 ratepayers that are currently taking advantage of this effort? For example, do we know how many of them are actually the property owners and how many of them would have a rent because they're renters and be paying the water bill as well?
So we do not explicitly track that. I can tell you from our experience that the most common type of customer enrolled in this program is a senior individual or senior couple living on a fixed income. And it would be our presumption as staff that most of these couples own their home and have probably owned their home on the order of 50 years.
Though, when we look toward expanding the program in the future, I would hope that we'd be able to generate some more data to see who we're actually reaching. We certainly don't have the situation of San Francisco, where a large percentage of their employees living in this PUC were taking advantage of their bailout program.
Well, I can confirm that we have no employees enrolled in the program.
Right. So that's the good. That's the type of information and support that will help build confidence. Next, I would hope that as we look toward future evaluations and development of this, we can look at trying to reach renters, including those in a multi-meter billing situation, where we can somehow work with a special rate, which allows the homeowners association or apartment owner to pick up a significant amount of the fixed charge and an appropriate charge for the variable charge to the individual users. That would promote conservation and really reach the people who I believe would be economically disadvantaged. With an average value of a home of $1.2 million in this town, dealing with homeowners doesn't, I think in many cases, reach those who are economically disadvantaged to the point where $20 a month, which has been the proposed waiver of fees, is significant. So, thank you.
Thank you, Director Wee. I will have to say I have to disagree with you on that. Living on, even though someone owns a home, living on a fixed income in this district is still pretty difficult. And I am pretty sure none of us are telling them they have to borrow against their house to pay our water rate.
Well, I don't think we're taking food out of anyone's mouth at $20 a month. That's my concern.
We have to disagree on that. But anyway, we'll be professional and disagree. But I am going to ask, do I have questions or comments from the rest of the board members? And do you have any thought between 35 versus 40?
I will make another comment. So at our last board meeting, we also discussed expanding the eligibility criteria. I think we put on the table 300% of the federal poverty limit, along with 50% of the area median income, I believe. Personally, I'm more inclined on finding a balance between both expanding the credit, but also expanding the eligibility criteria. So from that perspective, I think I would be, I'm certainly not opposed to at some point moving us up to the $40 amount, but I'd like to see us maybe move to $35 at this point, which is still a significant increase from the $25 bill credit that we currently apply, but then also looking at the possibility of expanding the eligibility criteria. I think I'd like to see us find a balance between both, and so that I think is a better allocation of the funds that we have. I'm assuming I'm probably in the minority on that, at least for tonight's vote, which is why we have what we have in front of us. But that would be my inclination. But if the board consensus is around $40, I'm certainly I'm not going to be opposed to that and vote against that tonight.
Actually, I think our consensus may be running at 35 because I kind of feel the same way. Let's go with 35. Let's see what the increase is, and we could adjust more if we find we still have the dollars available.
Yeah. Director Wee, were you going to make any comments?
Well,
Okay.
These are nominal to amounts, an additional $5 a month. And so I think the key that we need to focus on is to make sure that the administrative costs are kept at a minimum, because that's money that doesn't go to economically disadvantaged. And I would hope that we could, over time, develop a program which is minimal on administrative cost and finds a way to reach the people who are who utilize the water but are not currently billed directly. And that can be done with a special rate for multi-meter units, which has an appropriate split between fixed and variable cost. That would make sense.
We'll talk about rate structure some other times.
Well, now it fits into here on the area of affordability.
Well, but it only works.
On tap.
It only works if they had a meter, because otherwise the master meter, how do you determine what the water use is? So
you hit the point. We have an AMI program, which would be excellent if it were done at the department or townhouse level, not economically feasible or rational when we do it district-wide.
Director Wee, and Director Ganther, thank you for your comments. We're going to focus on help on tap. I have not seen Mr. Miyake jumping up and down at me yet, but we're straying to the point that you're making me very uncomfortable. So let's focus
We're still on the help on tap program that is, in this case, of modest or minimal benefit to the people who need it in our district.
We heard it loud and clear. Of your opinion.
May I make a quick additional comment? So on the former part of what Director Weed was discussing, the administrative costs of this program, I know that gets brought up quite a bit. We have discussed this in the Finance Committee and I believe also at our board meetings that we have one staff member who's spending a couple hours a week processing the applications. This is, I would say, a very well-run program, and we do keep our administrative costs very low. I don't know if and I don't want to put him on the spot, but if our manager of finance wants to weigh in on what those administrative costs look like. But I will say that the majority of the funds that go into this program are going to those who do need it.
Right. So I would roughly estimate, based on current enrollment and benefit amounts, that we are spending about 6 times as much on benefits to our ratepayers as we spend on administrative costs.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Director Akbari. So I'm just going to throw my 2 cents in. I actually believe $35 is a good starting point. My worry is that we do have a finite amount of money, and at least I personally started out looking at the expansion based on my concern of the economic impact of COVID-19. And we know more people are unemployed, so I am hoping more people will take advantage of this program. So I'm definitely personally much more comfortable starting at $35. See what's the impact to our finances related to Help on Tap, and then that slowly expand based on what we can afford and what we have observed. So with that,
Let me comment on that for just a moment, if I might. On the affordability, the limit is the non-revenue financing, which is $400,000. We have that amount of money to spend. When we look at it in the bigger picture on affordability to the district, 1/8 of 1% of our revenues. I mean, it's statistical noise. It's immaterial to the total cost and affordability to the district. The issue then becomes how much money do we have to be able to spend on this program, which is non-revenue financing because of 218, Proposition 218. And that's $400,000, and we're well within the $400,000 cap. Affordability to the district is a joke to talk in those terms.
okay, I will revise my comment that affordability, when I say affordability, equals the amount of money we could spend legally under 218 for this program. Thank you very much for your clarification, Director Weed. With that, I'm actually going to see if any members of the public that wish to address the board on this item. If you wish to address the board on this item, please raise your hand in the Zoom app or just speak up.
Yes, Miss Wang, it's Miss Morgan.
Ms. Morgan, please.
Hi, I'm always surprised when I hear from Director Weed, his comments about that's not a lot of money to take. It's not going to take food out of someone's mouth. Now, I am a retired teacher, probably going to reapply for this program. I'm a retired teacher, and my house today is worth $1.7 million, which is beyond belief. But anyway, I don't like the comments that, you know, it's hardly anything. It's $5, but $5 is a lot to some people. It might be nice that you might publicize this program more. I mean, we get a bill. Where is it on the bill? I don't see any information about the Help on Tap. So I just get annoyed when people just dismiss the need or say it's $5, it's not a big deal, it's not taking any food out of anybody's mouth. That's just my comment. Anyway.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan, for your comment. Do I have any other members of the public that wish to address the board on this issue? I am not seeing any raised hand or hearing anybody. So do I have a motion from the board on this item?
I'll move the item and note that I support the program. My comments are related to the fact that I feel the program should be far more directed to identify needs and meet those needs, which may well be far more money than what we're talking about now.
Thank you, Director Wee, but I do need a clarification from you. Are you moving staff motion for $40 or are you making a motion for $35 in assistance?
I'm sorry, I will make a motion for $40.
All right, do I have a second? Going once, going twice. I am not hearing a second. Do I have a new motion from the board?
I'll make a motion to move at $35 with the caveat that I hope that we can bring to the board an expansion of the eligibility criteria.
Thank you, Director Akbari. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Ms. Markugel, roll call, please.
Director Zakbari,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Weed.
Aye.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Director Weed, is it
I voted aye. Hopefully.
Okay. And Director Huang.
Aye. All right. With that, thank you, everybody.
Director Huang, just a clarification. So this action actually approved a resolution, and we changed the dollar amount from 40 to 35 that's included in the resolution. So just for the record, what staff will do is adjust the resolution to change the amount from $40 to 35 in the resolution, and that's the board action. That's the action that the board took. So I just wanted to clarify that we're going to make that change.
Thank you. All right, so with that, let's move on to reports, board committee reports. Do I have any questions or comments from the board on the board committee reports? No?
Let's see.
Director Wee.
Since I don't have it specifically in front of me, I will pass and make my comments under director's comments.
Okay, thank you, Director Wee. Any other directors wish to comment on the committee reports? Seeing none. Any members of public that wish to address the board on these committee reports? I am not seeing any hand raised. All right, operational reports. Any questions or comments from the directors on the operational reports? Not even the rainfall report, Director Gunther?
Hardness report. The hardness report remains fairly good.
Thank you.
We're not too bad.
All right. Do I have any question or comments from members of the public on any of the operational reports? If you wish to address the board, please raise your hand or speak up. Oh, I see a hand in the Zoom app. Mr. Nishimura, do you have a questions or comments on the operational reports for the board or staff?
Yes, I am also looking at the hardness map. I will commend the district for reducing the hardness in the northern portion of the service area. However, I will again remind the district that the USGS standard for non-hard water is 120, and I would like to encourage the district to continue to reduce the hardness throughout the district, and hopefully you can see 120 or less throughout the entire district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nishimura. So any other members of the public that have questions or comments on these operational reports? I am not seeing any.
I think it's a quick note based on the public input to note that the district standard, as I understand, is 150 as our internal criteria that we're shooting for.
Thank you, Director Wee. I believe that's correct, right, staff?
That's correct.
Yeah. All right, so with that, I'm not seeing any hands. Let's move on to staff presentation, please.
Thank you, President Wong. Staff has a number of presentations for the board this evening, beginning with the 2020 to 2025 Urban Water Management Plan update, which is a significant effort every 5 years. And Ms. Heides, Manager of Water Resources, will begin this process this evening for you.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. Staff is very pleased to be here tonight to provide a preview for the board on the latest update of the Urban Water Management Plan. We've been busy at work and excited to share results tonight, and also look for a little bit of input from the board on some of the items in the presentation as well. So I will go ahead and turn it over to our Manager of Water Supply and Planning, Thomas Nizer, who's here with us tonight to give some overview and kick off this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Heides. Before we begin the presentation, I just requested to sort of set the stage a bit here for the board. As most of the board's aware, I've been involved with the last 4 urban water management plans, and I want to give you all a heads up that this is the most complex one the district has ever done that we're heading into. Tonight, we have 2 water resource engineers here, Ms. Kelsey Oshiro, and Mr. Devin Becker, who will be co-managing this project. And they have a very complex task with tonight's presentation, and it is going to be quite a departure in many ways from what the board is usually seen in these presentations. That said, we do have a good story to tell despite some concerning future developments that you'll be hearing about. And I'd like to get everybody to remember back to last year's workshops that we did on water supply planning. A lot of that work that we did at that time, as was mentioned, is in preparation for this urban water management plan. And it'll feed directly into what you hear tonight. Particularly, I want to emphasize up front that in our planning, we were talking about a future worst case of loss of imported water supply. And now that worst case scenario has come to fruition. So our future supplies are definitely going to be diminished as we've been looking at in those workshops. We've also received advanced release of draft regional housing projections from the Association of Bay Area Governments, and we are recommending to include those in this update. As the board is well aware, these numbers have been escalating for years in the Tri-City, and the draft 2050 growth numbers will present a challenge for our water supplies. We recommend capturing these pressures in this urban water management plan, even though these things fall just slightly beyond the timeline that the urban water management plan requires, because inclusion of these elements in our update will help us to meet multiple district objectives and our needs over the next 5 years. And notably, it's going to help set us up with a good foundation as we get into our IRP update, which will begin in 2023. So with that, I would like to hand it over to Ms. Oshiro.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Neiser. I will quickly pull up the presentation. Great. Good evening, board and members of the public. My name is Kelsey Oshiro, and I am a water resources engineer in Water Supply and Planning Division, and I am a co-lead with Mr. Devin Becker on this 2020 to 2025 Urban Water Management Plan. Mr. Becker is also a water resources engineer with the Water Supply and Planning Division, and tonight we'll be presenting a review of inputs and new requirements. A couple of notes for today's presentation before we dive in. The slides presented here reflect a work in progress, and items that are still pending from external sources will be in blue text. This slide is just a list of commonly used acronyms and abbreviations that we may say verbally or might be listed in the slides presented below. And the purpose for today's meeting is to provide an update to the board on the new Urban Water Management Plan, or UWMP Act requirements, provide an update on water supply and demand forecasts, and provide an update for draft results of our water supply reliability analyses, including conservation program assumptions from the Water Efficiency Master Plan, or the WMP. And we do want to receive board input on key assumptions for the UWMP. First, we'll go over the UWMP versus the Integrated Resources Plan, or the IRP. So the UWMP is required by state law and is updated every 5 years. It requires a 20-year outlook, so from 2020 to 2040 for this cycle, but ACWD reports out for 25 years in best management practices, and we've been doing that to be able to cover the next over the next 5 years till it's updated again in 2025. It's a public report to demonstrate, among other things, that ACWD is properly planning for current and future water demands within our service area. The Integrated Resources Plan, or IRP, is a plan document that, in addition to proper planning, demonstrates our ability to meet ACWD specific planning criteria. It also puts an emphasis on optimization and management of ACWD resources and provides a closer look at production and treatment facilities. The IRP provides a 30 to 40-year outlook. So the IRP was last fully updated in 1995 and had a smaller update in 2014. And we plan to begin our next full update of the IRP in 2025. Next, we'll look at a summary of the new UWMP Act requirements. Here's a summary of our major new requirements required by the Department of Water Resources, or DWR, provided in their draft guidebook. And the red checkmark items are items that ACWD has already been doing in previous UWMPs and just need to be provided with a little bit more detail and updated for this cycle. So the first item is the Water Shortage Contingency Plan, which ACWD has been doing, will be updating. The next is the Drought Risk Assessment. This has been required previously to include our worst 3 years, but now it's being asked to include our worst 5 years, and we've already been doing that. We are also going to be incorporating projected land use changes in demand forecasting, long-term forecasting for each water supply source, and it was asked to include our groundwater sustainability plan or alternative, and our WMP. So we are currently in discussion with DWR on how to best and most effectively include those longer plans in our UWMP. The 3 items listed at the bottom of the slide are items that will be new for this cycle. The first item is compliance and consistency with the Delta Plan Policy WRP1. So it's currently highly recommended that we do this, which will be showing our reduced reliance on the Delta. And DWR is currently recommending we amend our 2015 UWMP, and we are in discussion with how to best go about this effort, because it will be a significant effort to do this. And if we do go ahead and amend the 2015 UWMP, it would be at the same time as adopting the 2020 UWMP. The next item is an energy analysis. So we'll be working with our operations department on this. And the last item is a seismic risk assessment and mitigation plan. And we'll be working with the State Water Project and San Francisco Public Utilities Commission to look at their infrastructure plans. Next, we'll be diving into key inputs on our demand and water supply changes. This slide presents a summary of our draft 2020 forecast. So we are using an econometric model by Madaus Water Management, or MWM, who's our consultant for our WMP, and it relies on regional population and jobs projection data. It is consistent with city general plans through 2030 and 2035. And as Mr. Neiser mentioned earlier, it will also be using a draft, ABAG, or Association of Bay Area Governments and Metropolitan Transportation Commission, MTC, their Plan Bay Area 2050 projection. And again, this is draft and still able to comment on. And we're also incorporating our single family residential, or SFR, survey results into our demand rebound. And all of this will be shown on the next slide in a graph. And overall, staff has modified these growth assumptions to better reflect our historic growth rates through the year 2040. And all additional projected housing will appear between 2040 and 2045. And these assumptions have been reviewed with city planning staff. So this slide is a summary of what we've just discussed on the previous slide. And this is our housing growth assumptions. So you can see here that the red line is our total housing, our historic total housing up through August of this year. And this dashed green line is the Plan Bay Area 2050 housing projections. You can see it's a lot more aggressive than what we've been experiencing. This first blue line just shows that this is what we as ACWD will be covering in the UWMP. So we'll be covering the 25-year time period from 2020 through 2045. And the second blue line just shows what is mandated for the UWMP, which is a 20-year planning horizon, so up to 2040. And this blue dot just shows the extent of city plans, and it shows that it's also more in line with 2050 Plan Bay Area housing, but it's historically been more aggressive than what we've been experiencing. And this purple line here is what staff is proposing to use for the UWMP for our housing growth rates. So you can see that the up to 2040, it is consistent with our historic growth rates here. And we've included all additional housing in this hockey stick-like linear fashion in between 2040 and 2045. And so this allows us to include a potential range of housing or range for future housing.
Can I ask a quick question? Do you have an estimate, or is it put in the difference between single family residences and multifamily apartment units? Because housing and most of the development we're looking at is going to be multifamily.
Right.
And apartment complexes.
Mr. Neiser, do you have any additional information on that?
Certainly, it's a spot on question. We've met with the cities to confirm this sort of discrepancy between city plans and ABAG and get their concurrence that basically all new housing moving forward is effectively multifamily, high density multifamily housing. So we actually are reflecting that in the water demand forecast. We'll have smaller per capita per housing numbers as well as less landscaping demand.
Okay, as one noted, they've removed the floor area ratio elements, and it's actually that's the only criteria. The number of units per acre has been removed, so we do have a dormitory rate on our rate structures. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Director Reed. So why include Plan Bay Area 2050 assumptions? We're compressing the complete ABAG/MTC 2050 numbers into years 24 and 2045, and which achieves the following objectives. It demonstrates that we're aware of regional planning, and it allows us to complete water supply assessments, or WSAs, and other California Environmental Quality Act CEQA needs. It provides published numbers to reference when engaging with any public discourse surrounding ABAG and MTC and regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA forecasts. It supports the establishment of appropriate development fees and long-range planning efforts in the IRP, which again, it will most likely begin its main update in 2025. And it allows ACWD to maintain historic practice of deferring to demonstrated growth rates for the 20-year UWMP planning horizon. So this avoids aggressive forecasts that may trigger unnecessary and costly investments in new supplies and facilities that may happen sooner rather than later. And it allows ACWD, we will revisit assumptions every 5 years in subsequent UWMPs, as previously mentioned, and the next cycle will be in 2025. Next, we'll just provide a summary of our water demand forecast. So our resulting water demand forecast was substantially reduced from 2015, primarily due to permanent post-drought conservation ethic, which is about 1 MGD in savings in addition to active and passive conservation. And here you can see the first blue text, and so this is currently being confirmed. And this table here shows a summary of our plumbing co-conservation estimates in 2045. So the 2015 UWMP forecast was showing that a savings of about 2 MGD, while our 2020 UWMP forecast is showing about 5 MGD. And this is, more efficient plumbing code standards plus more rigorous analysis of the plumbing code and lower per dwelling unit consumption because of high density future developments. This graph just shows what it will look like with and without conservation. So this blue line here is our historic demands with that rebound after 2015, and the red line shows a forecast with no plumbing code or active conservation, while this green line is our proposed forecast, which includes plumbing code and active conservation, or WEMP strategy B. And this slide shows again the same historic trend with the rebound, and our proposed green line, or our proposed forecast is this green line here. And this blue line is again just showing the UWMP 20-year planning horizon in 2040. And this orange dash line is our ACWD 2015 UWMP forecast. And it just coincidentally lined up really well here with the projection out at 2040, or with the Plan Bay Area 2050. And it's, it just shows that we are, actively increasing natural conservation and having more rigorous analyses. And in addition, this includes 22,000 housing units as well. So, and again, this hockey stick figure also has this area that could include potential range of future water demands that we could evaluate in the UWMP. The next slide is a summary of our Water Conservation Act of 2009, or the XBX 7x7, or 20 by 2020. It's wrapping up this year, and we've met all our targets previously and this year, so everyone's done a really great job. The main update is that there will be no new targets for 2021 through 2023. But per the California Water Code, each urban retail water supplier shall calculate its urban water use objective no later than January 1st, 2024. And again, I want to highlight the blue text here. The standards for determining these water use objectives are still in development at the state level, so more to come on that. And this graph just summarizes what we've done with SPX 7x7, and we've been well below our targets, and everyone's just been doing a really great job. So, and with that, we'll dive into water supply assumptions, and I'll hand it over to Mr. Becker.
Thank you very much, Ms. O'Shea.
Zach. Ms. Oshiro, before we move on to the next part, do I have any other questions or comments from the board?
A comment from John Weed.
Director Wee?
It'd be interesting to see with your conservation map, without conservation, a revenue projection based on our current rate structure and what the implications are with each of those two runs. Our almost 400% markup on commodity cost would show a dramatic difference in revenues.
Thank you, Director Wee. Any other questions or comments from the board? I'm not seeing or hearing any. Do I have any questions or comments from members of the public? If you wish to address the board or have any questions for the board staff, please raise your hand in the Zoom app or just speak up. I am not seeing or hearing any. Then I'll say thank you to Ms. Oshiro, and my apologies, Mr. Becker, for interrupting you. Please proceed.
No problem at all. Thank you, Director Wong. So as Ms. Oshiro said, I'm going to be presenting water supply assumptions that we will be including in our 2020 to 2025 UWMP. And as Mr. Neiser alluded to in the introduction to our presentation, the information we've received so far that we will incorporate in the development of our 2020 UWMP matches most closely with the worst case future water supply forecast that Mr. Neiser presented to the board back in July of 2019 at the Water Resources Planning Workshop #1. So I just want to make a note of that. And with that, I'm going to jump right into our state water project reliability forecast. So we received the 2019 delivery capability report from DWR, and we received that 2 months ago in August 2020. And we were hoping that DWR would have used calcium 3 to generate these results, and calcium 3 would have extended out the hydrology. However, DWR told us that calcium 3 was not ready, and so they used calcium 2 to generate this data set, and therefore the hydrology has been curtailed, really. So it goes from 1922 only to 2003, and therefore does not include the 2014 drought and does not include the hyper wet year of 2017. The delivery capability report from DWR includes 2 scenarios. It includes an existing conditions scenario and a future conditions scenario, and it's ACWD's practice to use the most conservative of those reliability scenarios, and that has been the future conditions scenario, and that's again what we're going to use for this urban water management plan. So that future conditions scenario shows our long-term average reliability from the State Water Project. It shows a reduction to about 50% of contract. And I'd like to contrast that with what we saw in the 2015 UWMP, which was about 62% average reliability. So we've seen a dramatic reduction in water supply reliability from the State Water Project. Single critical year in this future condition scenario, we see 8.7% table A. That's actually quite similar to what we saw for the single critical year from the 2015 UWMP, which is around 8%. The future conditions also includes climate change assumptions from DWR's climate change models and includes 45 centimeters of sea level rise by year 2040. Future conditions also includes updated environmental flow requirements, but does not include the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan, as that is still in development. And then also it does not include Delta conveyance. So that's a quick summary of the reliability from the State Water Project. And I'll move on to San Francisco supplies. So you can see here in this blue text, what that means is we haven't received the final numbers from San Francisco. We will receive those in December 2020. However, we have had back channel discussions with San Francisco's regional planning, and they have told us that we should assume a 40% unimpaired flow criterion for the Tuolumne River, that most likely that's what we're going to see in December as well. And the dry year allocation formula from BOSCA has also, that's unchanged from the previous urban water management plan. In terms of local supply, and the water supply assumptions around local supply. For groundwater recharge, we haven't seen any changes actually for local supplies from the 2015. So for groundwater recharge, we have reduced diversions due to fisheries flow requirements on Alameda Creek. And then for Del Valle Reservoir, also that reflects our contract and our live stream requirements. Next slide. So in terms of other modeling assumptions that we use for the UWMP, so we have our Integrated Resources Planning Model, or IRPM, and we've made a fairly significant improvement from the 2015 version of the IRPM. What we've done is we have incorporated modeling of San Luis Reservoir carryover operations into the model. And that's important really for two reasons. First of all, it more closely represents what we actually do here in operations at the district. And maybe even more importantly for the modeling results from the IRPM, it reduces the frequency and magnitude of our shortages over the 82-year planning hydrology. And really what's happening there is that San Luis carryover water, it provides SBA, accessible SBA supply in certain years when table A allocation is low and our semi-tropic return capacity is also limited. And then the second bullet here, modeling of backup water from semi-tropic into San Luis Reservoir. That is not something that's been incorporated into the model so far, but it is something we could do as a future development, possibly for the next urban water management plan. So next slide. All right, so this is the draft water supply reliability findings from the IRPM. I'm gonna take a little bit of time on this slide and try to walk everyone through what's presented here. So the UWMP regulations require agencies to publish projections of shortages for a single dry year and multiple dry year periods over the 20-year UWMP planning horizon. And so what the IRPM does is it will take basically demand levels that are important for the UWMP. So it'll take the bounds of the window, so 2020 to 2040. And then as Ms. Oshiro mentioned, we go out 5 more years to 2045. So we put those demand levels in the IRPM, and then it runs through 82 years of historic hydrology with the demand assumptions that Ms. Oshiro already discussed, and also all the water supply assumptions that I just discussed in the last 2 slides ago. And so what we see here, if we look at the top table, is at 2020 demands running through the whole 82-year hydrology, our worst single dry year shortage is 2%, and that occurs in 1977. And then at the 2040 demand level, we see that the worst single dry year shortage is around 12%, also in 1977. And so that captures the UWMP planning horizon window. And then as Ms. Oshiro presented before, we have this hockey stick where our demands increase up to our ABAG 2050 MTC numbers. And so you can see 2045, we have a sort of a jump to a higher shortage at 29%. And the bottom table is for a 5-year period within the 1987 to 1992 dry period. And you can see at the 2020 level of demand, we actually don't show a shortfall from the modeling results. At the 2040 level of demand, we have the single worst year in that 5-year period is at 5% with an average of 2% shortage. And then again, that hockey stick, as it goes past the UWMP planning horizon, it jumps up to 21% in the worst year and a 10% average over the 5 years. So that's a presentation of these tables, and I want to now draw everyone's attention to this footnote. So the shortages that are reflected here in our IRPM output, they do not reflect any delta disruption like we actually experienced in 2014. And so just as a reminder to everyone here, to the board, what happened in 2014 was DWR reduced table A allocation to 0% for 6 months. and then only at the end of the year in September brought it back up to 5% for the year. And so if we were to include an assumption like this, we anticipate that these results from the IRPM would likely change by increasing to basically plus 10% on top of the numbers that you see here. So I would like everyone to actually hold that thought as we move to the next slide. And so this slide is actually just a graphical representation of the tables we just saw on the previous slide. And I'll walk through the blue or the purple line here, which is a single dry year, just to kind of ground everyone again in what's going on. So at 2020 demand levels, we have over that 82-year hydrology, the worst shortage is 2%. And then that slowly ramps up as our demands slowly increase out to 2040. And then we see that as a 12% shortfall. And that's the end of our regulatory planning horizon. And then out beyond that, we see with that higher demand, it really ramps up. And again, you see the asterisk down here. This is without any delta disruption. And so I want to say that our staff recommendation is actually to include sort of a new assumption into the modeling, which is to basically model a delta disruption, because we actually experienced that in 2014, and show for any year where we receive a 10% allocation of table A or less, our recommendation is to actually model what we experienced in 2014 and include that in our UWMP planning. So next slide. So I'm just going to quickly recap sort of our staff recommendations based on the data. This is kind of a dense set of slides that we just saw. And then once I recap that, I'd like to take a break and seek some board input. So again, like I just said, our first recommendation is to actually include an additional assumption into our planning, which is to have a delta disruption for table A allocations less than or equal to 10% and include that in our IRPM, and then model those shortages and have those show up in the UWMP. And the second recommendation is to actually just proceed with the growth assumptions that we've presented today that Ms. Oshiro presented earlier. And what that does, as you saw with those hockey stick shortages that mirrored the hockey stick demands, it'll show large shortages that are actually outside of our 20-year planning horizon. And then we will just discuss in the body of the UWMP that we have future supply options such as indirect potable reuse, IPR, Los Vaqueros Reservoir, enhanced conservation, water transfers, etc. Kind of the whole suite of things that are potentially in our future. We'll discuss what they are, but not actually, be required to commit to any one of them in this document. Alternatively, if the board prefers, we could decide which one we want to include, and those would actually drop down those shortages because we would include that in as a source of supply in our IRPM modeling. But that is not our recommendation. And so with that, I would like to pause for any questions on these last slides or any board input.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Questions or comments from the board? Director Gunther?
I agree completely with the including the delta disruption. I mean, we had it, so we know what's going to happen. It definitely could happen again. I also agree with not including any future supplies in the actual program for now. We don't know. We're looking at them. There's various options. And it's valuable to know they're there, but for the report, I think it's good where we are, what we're doing right now. So I go along with what the staff's putting forward here.
Thank you, Director Gunther. Director Wee, Director Akbari?
I'm in agreement with what Director Gunther said and with staff recommendation here. I definitely think we should include the delta disruption assumptions. A question that I do have just for clarification. So if the delta, if we were to have a 0% table A allocation or a very low table A allocation, that would also impact our ability to draw water from that we've banked at semi-tropic as well, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
it's a great comment. So from my understanding, what happened in 2014 was that while DWR did reduce the allocation to 0% for table A deliveries, they did still allow carryover water that was stored in San Luis Reservoir to be returned. And that was basically, since it's south of us, it's actually water that was coming out of the Delta, but it was labeled as carryover water. We were not, as far as I'm aware, able to return semi-tropic water in that 6-month window. However, once they upped the allocation to 5%, then there was the ability to take either table A or semi-tropic or whatever other water type, however we wanted to code it, back to the district.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make, for my own clarification, I wanted that. Okay, yeah, like I said, I'm in favor of a staff recommendation here, everything on the slide.
Thank you, Director Akbari. Director Wee?
Yes. Following up on the comment about Delta disruption, I encourage you to look at a 0% allocation, which is what really triggered the 2014 problem, and where we had to get emergency water from Contra Costa. It was paper water, but it was 5,000 acre feet of federal water. And as a separate option, because that was hopefully they learned their lesson, and our drought really lasted the 4 to 6 months that occurred, because we were in pretty tight straits when we lost our semi-tropic. The water transfers strike me as being an item which does not require new capital construction. And I would encourage us to break down your options as you look at future supply to those that can be done with existing infrastructure and those that require additional major infrastructure investments. The Santa Clara Valley Water District just announced that they have reached an agreement to bring 75,000 acre feet a year of federal water through the South Bay Aqueduct. We are on that same pipeline. To my knowledge and understanding, we do not have a similar agreement to be able to use federal water in the SBA. So, as well as using water transfers through the Hetch Hetchy water system. That's your least cost, most variable, by far your least cost. Next, if we are to look at various projects and reservoirs, the IRP is a base feed. It's not a one that meets peak requirements. And I would hope that if there is an IRP, an IPR project, I would like to be briefed on it. It's suggested that the staff has developed a shovel-ready $550 million recycled water project for ACWD, of which I have not seen that report, and I'd certainly be interested in being updated on where it exists today. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Wee. Just my 2 cents. First of all, thank you very much for the presentation. I have to say, staff anticipated all my questions, including down in the footnotes, so that's pretty amazing. I was writing down a list of questions to ask, and then you answered it. So thank you very much for being able to read my mind. I'm actually very glad to see that we are going to include Delta disruption. I'm definitely in support of that. We always reference to the fact that we have semi-tropic water that we could bring back in a drought, but there is a limit to that. We physically need water to be flowing in State Water Project in order to take water back. We actually don't pump the water back from semi-tropic. We actually get the water back through a series of exchange. So there has to be water, and there's limitation to that in a drought. So I'm very happy to see bullet number 1. And yes, I could definitely go with just have a general discussion about supply options in terms of indirect potable reuse and Los Vaqueros. Los Vaqueros Reservoir Project is actually the project that would allow us to exchange water with Central Valley Project, the federal project. That is our potential nexus. And in terms of indirect portable reuse, I am definitely a supporter of water reuse, but only when it pencils out and make business case. Before we proceed down the direction, we definitely do need to take another serious look to see if it works for the district and our customers or not. So with that, I am going to open it up to.
President
Yes.
Wong, may I ask just one more question?
Of course.
Can you define real quickly enhanced conservation? How does that compare to the conservation efforts that we took that went underway in the 2014 drought? And are there any differences, or I just want to be clear about what we mean by enhanced conservation.
Sure. I will probably pass that one off to Thomas.
Certainly. We're actually mixing sort of three different things there. What we did during the drought, our emergency rationing, true conservation, we're actually using the wrong term. We should talk about efficiency, enhanced efficiency. As the board's well aware, we are involved in the water efficiency master plan right now. We have a strategy that's been identified by the board, strategy B, which is included in here. So Director Akbari, you actually caught us with some bad semantics. We really should say enhanced efficiency. Okay. That would be maybe moving to strategy C, which starts to get into the more extreme sort of conservation measures like we see in coastal communities, such as passing extreme sort of retrofit on resale policy measures with the cities, really trying to shorten the gap in our supply deficit so that we can have water to bank and semi-tropic for droughts. So that's what this would refer to.
Okay.
Director Wong, if I could add one more comment.
Director Wee?
On another briefing, which I saw the charts on, it showed that Del Val, we had only allocated 47 acre feet for per year for the Del Val options. And yet we have a 7,500 acre foot per year contract agreement for local water runoff of the total of 15,000 acre feet of storage. That's just the storage, not the water supply, which can be warehouse. So I'd be very interested in looking at Del Val as being one of the issues we look at, and particularly the potential of the N3 Ranch to take on the storm and flood control issues that are currently tying up the capacity, 50,000 acre feet of capacity at Del Val. Del Val could solve the problem with at a nominal cost to Los Vaqueros and some of the other IPR. Thank you.
So Director Weed, I know we're digressing, but in terms of N3, I thought staff has already presented there are no additional water.
That is a poor synopsis of what staff has proposed, and it's not a complete review by staff of the various options when you take into account that Del Val is currently tied up and being left empty because of future flood control. That flood control could be accommodated on N3, releasing Del Val for 50,000 acre feet and making this an exercise totally unneeded. It would solve all of it would make us drought immune. We wouldn't have to play this game that we're going through now.
All right, so I am going to say I'm at fault at this, but the only way to make your idea work is to flood Del Val periodically and or build dams.
To reoperate Del Val to its design capacity and maybe flood out some parking lots.
So I'd like to suggest this is some great discussion, but I think we've actually veered off of the urban water management plan and into the world of integrated resources planning or water supply master planning, which is that step we're going to take in 3 years from now. Right now, we can only discuss things we have in hand. That's actually what the law requires. Great discussion for a couple years down the road, but as far as what we have to accomplish in the next 9 months is to publish our reliability for our customers' information, including what we know about future growth with the water we have in hand, with contracts we have in hand. So I definitely, a lot of great discussion. I'm really looking forward to starting the IRP renewal process in 3 years' time.
I do apologize. My computer seems to blink out a little bit, but I will say, if what I caught is correct, Mr. Nizer, my apologies. I fell into temptation. So with that, I think you heard from the board. I am going to ask if there are any questions or comments from members of the public. If you wish to address the board, please raise your hand or speak up. Mr. Nishimura.
Yes, I'm very glad that the board is and comments were made regarding the semi-tropic water bank. All too often, I believe that the public is led to believe that we have this 150,000 acre-foot water bank out in the middle of the Central Valley. And when you use the term bank, most people equate that with a financial bank where you can deposit money, and then if you need the money, you just go there and withdraw the money. The semi-tropic water bank, as you all know, is not quite that way. There is no pipeline that runs between the district and the semi-tropic storage facility. And in order to get the water back, you have to wheel it, which, as we just heard, requires a minimum amount of flow. And this has been a concern of mine for quite some time, that the assumptions about the availability of such water during adverse drought events has been overstated. And I fully support this recommendation that the semi-tropic water is taken offline during in scenario planning for when the Delta Table A allocation is less than 10%. The other comment I would make is in terms of additional sources, I see enhanced conservation, Los Vaqueros water transfers, and IPR. I am curious to know whether potential expansion of the desal plant or actually desalination is another option to put on the table. Thank you.
Quick clarification, if I might. Do we lose semi-tropic when it goes to 0%? That happened in 4 months during the life of the project to date, in the 60 years of the project. So it is an unusual circumstance at best, and it's a very short-term experience we've had to date.
That's correct. And I'll add, make reference to earlier, Mr. Becker mentioned, we are actually in discussions with DWR. They've actually confirmed with us some new operating parameters, which we first exercised during the 2014 drought, which is we actually preloaded semi-tropic water into San Luis Reservoir before the actual contract delivery window. And that's a functionality that we will have moving forward. And that was one of the improvements in our analyses that Mr. Becker mentioned earlier. So that will be part of our analysis. Semi-tropic outperformed during the drought. I don't want to disparage that investment by the district. It paid off very well for the district.
Thank you, Mr. Nizer.
And I'd actually like to just clarify that comment. So that was something I discussed, that concept of backup water and modeling that in the IRPM from semi-tropic to San Luis Reservoir. That actually hasn't been done for our model currently, and that will be something we have as a future improvement. So these modeling results, even with our assumption that we have a delta disruption, once we add that in, we still won't be able to preload San Luis with our semi-tropic water for this iteration. That's not something that's on the table, but next time around, we hope to include it.
Thank you, Mr. Becker, for the clarification. Do I have any other questions or comments from members of the public? If so, please raise your hand in the Zoom app or speak up, please. I'm not seeing or hearing any last minute comments from directors.
San Luis, if I might. Santa Clara needs to find water for Pacheco, and they'll be changing some of their operating criteria, and that may well open up some opportunities for us, possibly to sell water at a great premium to Santa Clara, to Valley Water, when they desperately try to find water for the Pacheco Reservoir to justify their decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment, Director Lee. With that, I am going to ask staff, do you have enough direction from the board?
Thank you, Director Wong. Yes, I feel, first of all, thank you for all your comments, members of the board and also members of the public. I do feel like we have a very clear direction here for our continuing work on the UWMP. So thank you very much. I have a few more slides that really is just a summary of kind of the whole presentation. So if everyone's comfortable, we can move on to the next.
Yes, please.
So Yes, this is something that I noted before it was not included in DWR's reliability data set that they provided. So there is no delta conveyance in our reliability for the State Water Project as it was presented and incorporated into the IRPM. However, DWR is currently evaluating conveyance options in the Delta and will analyze a range of potentially feasible alternatives in a detailed environmental impact report. And then ACWD will acknowledge these potential future scenarios through an uncertainty analysis. But again, the Delta conveyance is not assumed in DWR's reliability analysis or in our analysis for the UWMP this time around. So next slide. And so, yes, this is just a summary of the assumptions that we are intending to include in our UWMP analysis. So we will include the 2050 ABAG MTC housing figures into the UWMP. We will have a staff modified growth pattern. We will take board direction and include WEMP strategy B for conservation. And then all that gets basically wrapped up into a demand forecast that we will use for our modeling. And then for water supply assumptions, we will use 40% unimpaired flow from San Francisco. We will, of course, make adjustments if we get a new data set, but we don't anticipate that from San Francisco. For the State Water Project, we will use the DCR as published, and that is without the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan and without Delta conveyance. And again, we are going to model without any new sources of supply or new facilities.
Could I ask on that last one, water transfers? Do we not have the potential for water transfers and greatly enhance them? Will that be at all part of your analysis as an option?
So I appreciate that point, and I actually really appreciate your comments. That is something that we are actively looking at. I mean, it's one of our, it's in the suite of new water supply options. And in fact, this year, for the first time, we participated in the dry year transfer water program from the state water contractors. And we received, I think, approximately, we don't know entirely with the carriage losses, but we think around 1,200 acre feet is what we anticipate we'll receive for the year. And yes, so water transfers are something that I guess this year for the first time we've demonstrated through that process. And like you mentioned before, in the drought, we received water from Contra Costa as well. It is not something that we have incorporated in our water supply assumptions for the IRPM or for this urban water management plan, but it is something that we are actively looking into all the time and something we are evaluating.
Here's we're breaking down some barriers with the Brisbane project and being able to use the PUC, Oakdale, getting some Stanislaus surface water and delivering it to the Bay Area. And it strikes me that this is a wonderful exercise, but water transfers makes the whole thing moot, and particularly if we can get the reoperation of Del Valle. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Weed. Let's move to the next slide. So this is just our next steps for the 2020 UWMP. So we intend to continue work and incorporate pending external updates and include our revised assumptions with that Delta disruption. And the draft UWMP will be made available for public review as of May 2021. We'll receive public comments during the public review period, and then a public hearing and the adoption of the UWMP and possible amendments will occur in June of 2021. And so with that, that concludes our presentation for tonight. And yeah, if there are any other questions from the board, we're happy to take them now. And thank you very much.
Any other questions from the board?
I don't really have a question. I'd like to comment that this report is really good. It's also very complex with lots of variables still in it, and assumptions that we're even not allowed to make, but we're looking at ourselves, which really shows, you know, foresight and good work. So thank you very much. I know this is very difficult to do, and you know, having been on ground zero of semi-tropic, the concept of zero transfer, when I certainly looked at that, was not was a thought. It was back then, yeah, at some point we might get 0, but the program was still worth it because of the possibilities were so remote. Maybe remote came sooner than we thought, but nonetheless, it still works out, and it's a great program and a terrific report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Gunther.
And Director Weed, I'd appreciate sometime an opportunity to get a review of what your Del Val contract and live stream restrictions are and the assumptions being used.
Thank you, Director Reed.
No additional questions or comments from my end. Just a word of thanks to Kelsey, Devin, and everyone who worked on this report.
Thank you, Director
Thank you.
Farr. And I just want to say I actually do feel much better knowing that we could actually bring semi-traffic water back earlier and park it locally or semi-locally. That actually made me feel much better about the function of semi-traffic in the route. And I would say thank you to Mr. Becker and Ms. Oshiro for a great presentation, and Mr. Nizer. Thank you for bringing us back on point. Unfortunately, my attempt to do a factual correction, I kind of let it get away from me. So my apologies, but thank you very much for the great presentation. So with that, let's move on to item 6.3.2, please.
Thank you, President Wong. So the board has an opportunity now to become interior decorators because Shireen Gonzalez, our public affairs supervisor, is back with some choices for you to make regarding the boardroom refresh. And I'm confident that eventually we will be back in the boardroom at some point. Maybe not for a while though. So Shireen received input from the board a few months ago and has done a little research and is providing you with an opportunity to provide input on several boardroom decorating options. So with that, Shireen.
Hello, good evening, board and staff. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, but your volume's a little low.
How about that? Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for this opportunity to review our boardroom refresh options. Circling back to a discussion that happened back in the August board meeting and an opportunity to discuss options from taking the boardroom from black and white to Technicolor. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of background and then options so that we can move forward with this project. So back in August, Mr. Shaver did present to you a couple of boardroom options. Currently in phase 1, which we are nearly complete, is the replacement of our audio-visual, our AV equipment, as well as our video recording system, and that is in the boardroom as well as the multi-purpose room. So those updates are currently in process and nearly complete with a budget of about $230. And then Mr. Shaver also presented a phase 2, which is a much more comprehensive modernization and update to the boardroom. And that would fall under our CIP projects at approximately $2.3 million, not fully scoped. And that would look at reconfiguring the purpose of the boardroom, opening it up for more meetings, additional purposes in addition to the boardroom. We have, under normal circumstances, staff is fully built out as far as headquarters, so we're really looking at opportunities to maximize the use of the boardroom. So that would be a phase 2 approach, but that would not be until fiscal year 25-26. So Mr. Shaver did present kind of a somewhere in between, which was would be a phase 1A option, and that would be a refresh that would look at branding the boardroom, adding color and visual interest, as well as preserving the history of ACWD. Just a modest budget and a modest schedule. This would be something that we could do in the interim before we go with a full kind of remodel, about $20,000, and it's something that we could move quickly on if there is a silver lining with COVID. It's that, you know, we aren't hosting meetings in person, but rather we are doing them via Zoom like we are tonight. But when we go back to those in-person meetings, we could have a refresh of our boardroom, and it could be more reflective of our community, and it could have some branding as well. So we got the thumbs up with the phase 1 option, moving forward with that. And so those are the options that I'm going to present to you this evening. So a little bit of what was presented to the board in August, and that was ACWD branding and logo placement. The board meetings are taking place via Zoom right now, but when they are hosted in person, we are streaming or making those available on YouTube. And right now there is no branding as far as logo placement. When people log on to our YouTube, they know that they're visiting ACWD's YouTube channel, but there's nothing in the boardroom that really reflects the district. We also got the thumbs up in August to remove photos of past board members and general managers, but we still want to honor our history, and those images will be scanned and preserved. We've already reached out to a local contractor for that work, and those images would be posted to the district's website. And then also honor the past board members and general managers by posting a plaque on the back wall, and I'll review options for that as well. And those would include names of past board members and general managers. Additionally, we want to add photos, graphics, maps, visual interests, just to add a little bit of color to the boardroom and really be a representation of our district, our community, and highlight some of the projects that we have over 100 years of work within the Tri-Cities. So I'm going to present to you this evening several options to get your guidance and your feedback. I kind of liken it to an eye exam. When you go for your eye test and it's like, is it A or is it B? Is it B or is it A? And then they start to look alike. But these are some examples of logo placement. As I mentioned, you know, we want to have branding within our boardroom so that when we have in-person meetings and when videos are available on YouTube, people can really recognize and identify that they're watching an ACWD board meeting. So I have a few options for you here that I wanted to present this evening. So the first option, and you can see it's kind of like a blank slate. So the boardroom is wiped clear of any current images, no one here, just a nice panoramic view. This would be an option of the logo posted on the front wall. The projection screen is down because during board meetings it is down for presentations, but just wanted to present this to you as an option. It was shown previously. This is what it would look like, the logo if it were on the front wall. If you were looking at the boardroom from the back of the room, it would be considered the front, and it would not be visible if the projection screen was down, but certainly would be visible if the projection screen was up. Another option would be to put it to the left of the dais if you're looking straight on. Again, providing branding so that from a YouTube video, you would be able to see that. And then another option is to have the logo on the dais. So there is a podium here, right in the middle of the room, but the way that the cameras are located, you would actually be able to see the ACWD logo if it were placed on the dais. So I will show you three more additional options, and then I'll pause for questions and comments and feedback, if that's okay. So another option and feedback that was provided back in the August board meeting was ACWD text. So at the front of our headquarters building, we have in brass letters Alameda County Water District. So that was a suggestion that was mentioned at the board meeting in August. So I wanted to present those options to you as well. So this would be Alameda County Water District, again on the front wall where the projection screen currently displays. Alameda County Water District, where the current pictures are the black and white photos of previous board members. And then Alameda County Water District text on the dais. I'd like to go into additional options as well, but I think I'll pause there. If there are any questions, comments, or suggestions,
Questions or comments from directors? Any preferences?
I like stuff on the dais. I'm not particularly fond of the lettering. It's hard to read. The logo is easy to read, and I think it's got some color to it. The letters, I'm not sure. Look fine out front. It's a building, but I like the logo on the dais. The other thing is the screen. You know, the screen's down or up, it's going to cover it. So just keep it down there. It's not blocked. Looks good. Says who we are.
Great. Thank you.
Director Wee, Director Akbari?
I'm kind of in agreement with Director Gunther. I was wondering if maybe we could have some kind of a combined option, like, oh, excuse me. Sorry, my phone went off right when I was talking. If it would be possible to have like the text on the dais and a logo on the side wall or some combination like that. If that's an option, then I think I would be open to that. But otherwise, if it's just one or the other, then definitely I would say the logo and either the sidewall or the dais. I'd probably lean towards the dais, but I wouldn't be opposed to having it on the sidewall either.
Great. Thank you. I'll also present some additional conceptual ideas that show some visual interest and logo placement as well.
Great.
Director Wee?
Yes. Where we should be looking at this from a video perspective, when someone turns it on, and whether the board members are speaking or members of the staff are speaking, someone should clearly see a logo giving them a frame of reference of who's speaking and what the organization is. So that would mean possibly logos both at the presentation on the dais, on each of the daises, including those with the staff. The logo is quicker and easily read. Putting the entire text on the wall is not a problem. I would like us to consider putting the pictures of the board members on the back wall and retaining that as part of our heritage. Putting them behind us where they're looking down on the audience is not as effective as having them us look at them. Remember the heritage of this district over its years, and we're trying to maintain a legacy. Something similar with the general managers, they could remind the general manager that he is there, that there have been others that preceded him as well. To the extent that we maintain that heritage concept, we should even consider photographs of major department heads in their areas that we can show people that the people who have sat there. At the Air Force Academy, what they would do is each of the division chairs sitting around the table with the major faculty would have their names put on the back of a chair. Some had very few, some had long links where they had high turnover in those departments. But that sense of heritage should be captured somehow in the district. Ultimately, we're going to go to a level floor, which is right. And we should also consider that when we do start switching this to other organizations, that we have the ability to cover the logo fairly quickly and easily, so that other organizations can put their logos and presentations there, and maybe make a few extra bucks that we can put into our Help on Tap program. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wee. Those are actually very creative ideas, but I think with the limited budget we have for Phase 1A, that's narrowed down the discussion a little bit. As far as the choices, I think in terms of looking at it from the video's point of view, the sidewall is most effective because putting it on the dais in front of us tends to be covered just because if we have a speaker that literally will be blocking the middle of the view, and it has something to do with where we mount the camera, right? With the minimum funding we have, I could actually go with either the sidewall or the dais. But if you're just looking at it from how the video would look on the sidewall, probably would be a lot more obvious. But truth is, I could go either way. So I think Ms. Gonzalez, our thoughts are very muddled. I don't think we gave you a really clear direction, did we?
Well, we actually have a few more options to review, so that might actually kind of narrow it down a bit and help us get to where we need
All right.
And I'm keeping score too. So I'm making a chart here.
I do agree with Director Weed that I think audio or the video perception is very important. So on that point, I really concur. As far as the Air Force Academy, Coast Guard, we were happy we had chairs. So that's beside the point.
Please proceed, Ms. Gonzalez.
Great, thank you. So those were options regarding our logo as well as text. And let's see, let's go back to where we were. So these are some photo collage options. We discussed as adding some visual interest, and these are conceptual. So certainly the photos are not finalized, but really just to kind of paint the picture, so to speak, of what some options might be. So this would be a photo collage option, multiple collages, kind of speaking to our history, you know, our missions regarding high quality drinking water, environmentally minded, stewards of the environment, that we're protective as well. So multiple placement regarding the photo collages. These are something that could be moved around. So come 24, 25, when we do a more comprehensive remodel, it could be something that we put up now and we save for later as well. And it's timeless, so to speak, and we can still use these. So this would be one example of a photo collage option. Again, multiple placement regarding the text or logo of Alameda County Water District, either on the dais. Right here, we don't have it, our logo or the text on the sidewall because, or excuse me, the front sidewall, because if these images were to be viewed by the public, it would be a little difficult for them to see. So we're proposing that they would be on the most sidewall nearest members of the public. Additionally, would be one large photo collage, kind of moving through where we were, where we are, and where we're going. ACWD water there when you need it, kind of black and white, sepia tone, and then full color. And the location proposed would be on the front side wall. Because these would be larger images and a larger photo collage, it could be something that could be seen from the camera and by members of the public. And again, we have options here regarding our logo placement or text of Alameda County Water District. And then to the right side, it could be a map, or it could be a photo, a landscape photo or something as well. Additional options that I wanted to present would be timelines. So honoring our history, and again, because these images would be a little more difficult to see if you're on camera or back in the distance, proposing that they would be closer to the audience, and this would be walking us through, again, where we were, where we are, where we're going. Something to keep in mind with this is, you know, as we have accomplishments, how we would add to them. So if it's something that's developed today, and then when we complete our fish ladders next year, for example, is that something that we could add on here? But really, this would give us an opportunity to continue to honor our history and show kind of some of our key highlights throughout the district, throughout the many years, and just kind of incorporating that water imagery and the flows and multiple locations of our logo as well. Director Wong, this shows it here, the logo off to the side as well, which I think looks quite nice. This is another example of keeping with the timeline option. This is an imagery of our rubber dam, kind of a nice depiction of a flow of water, ACWD water there when you need it. Again, this is truly conceptual. The pictures have not been finalized, but just presented to give you an idea, and would be proposed that that would go also on the sidewall so that it's most visible to members of the public and to the camera. Again, keeping in mind that this room could be reconfigured in the future for greater use other than board meetings. And so really giving an opportunity for members of the public to kind of learn a little bit more about our history. And this example has ACW, Alameda County Water District, in text off to the front wall, off to the side. And speaking to the point of the past directors and general managers, it was previously presented that we would honor our past general managers as well as board of directors with a plaque. We want to have something that's modern. And so these are just some examples of what would be available to us. The one that's pictured in the photo here is not cost prohibitive. I've looked into it a little bit more, but these would be some examples. Acrylic with printed graphics and design. Maybe this is representative of kind of the swoosh of the ACWD logo and water. We could have it in blue. Another example would be the plaque that has a glass panel. I've also looked into it. We're able to update these as is needed when changes are made, but would certainly be an option in keeping within our budget and would honor our history as well. So with that, I will open it up for discussion and direction so that we can get moving on this project.
Any directors have questions, comments, preferences?
I'm happy to kick it off. The last option with the timeline with the graphic of the rubber dam was definitely my favorite. I think this one it looks fantastic. I really like this one. I like the placement on the sidewall. And then I think I would say that my preference would be having maybe the text on the dais that says Alameda County Water District and then having the logo on that sidewall. I feel like some combination of that would probably look best. And then in terms of the plaque, I kind of lean towards the etched glass panel. I think that one looks really nice. And as long as it's easy to update, then I would probably lean towards that.
Would that be this one here? Can you see my mouse?
Okay. Yes, yeah. The one that you're circling with your mouse.
Okay.
And I just want to point out, these are just sort of conceptual photos. The hope is that we kind of get general direction, and then the board just unleashes staff on this, and you'll be happy with what we come up with. That's the hope. Or at least comfortable that you will be happy with what we come up with.
We'll deliver, we promise.
Thank you. Director Wee, Director Gunther?
I kind of like, I'll be honest, I do like the portraits of the directors. It's a historic walkthrough. One thing, maybe we don't need the pictures as big. You know, I mean, if we want to go with these smaller plaques, fine, but we could downsize those photos. I mean, I would think, and we still have them then. And I would stay in the back. The other thing is, I don't think we should put pictures behind where the directors are, behind the dais. These would be for people who are coming in, that people don't go there. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think people tend to move towards the back, certainly during meeting times. Not a big fan of the timeline stuff. I really like the historic pictures, but obviously, considering what I use as a background here, on my Zoom, I like historic pictures, although this is today. So I think we've got some terrific history in the district and probably some fantastic photos out there. Now, something in the potential future, I'm talking when we're finished running this thing out, I have no idea how much they cost, but the concept of a flat screen video, possible feed from the creek. I mean, we got a beautiful creek set up. We do have water sometimes flowing over the dams. We have at least one fish ladder in place, another one coming up. There's some really incredible, footage out there that if we just played it over time during the day when it's dark, we would play a day run. I don't know how expensive that would be, but I mean, with things the way they are today, I mean, I know you can get the computerized thing that changes the picture on your desk. I haven't priced one of those in a while, but that's something I'm thinking more long-term, further out. Maybe staff's already thinking about that. I like the logo on the behind us, or logo behind us. I could live with the lettering on the dais. I guess that's what I got. I probably totally confused Shireen, but that's fine.
Just for clarification, when you say logo behind us, is that behind the projection screen or
No,
to the?
it would be off to the side.
Okay.
I think putting something behind the projection screen is a mistake.
Okay.
Because it's down so frequently, kind of, and if it comes down, if it doesn't cover it all the way, it looks silly.
Okay, great. No, you didn't confuse me. I was just taking notes. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Gunther. Director Wee?
I would suggest that we look at wherever we have a camera angle, including the speaker podium, that we have our logos, so someone who sees that presentation or video will give them a sense of location. I stated earlier that I felt that the former director should be in, portrait should be retained, possibly smaller on the back wall. I would encourage us as we go through this to keep in mind how we're going to make this even more functional. Eventually, hopefully in the 25-26 timeframe, we'll see this room as being an expansion of our Emergency Operations Center. Some of our board directors have had an opportunity to see how massive a response is following a major catastrophe. And all the space you have will be effectively used if you have the capabilities. So, and you'll be able to you get all the support you can gainfully employ. So this room may be part of that expanded EOC. To that end, it's all a choice of taste and decoration, and it looks like we're doing well. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wee. As for me, I'm in complete agreement with Director Akbari. I actually like the logos on the sidewall, and we could do the letters and the dais. And I actually like the edge glass panel plaque in the back. With that said, I have to say I rather the black and white pictures not come back to the board, because that wall reflects what we were, where we came from, but now who we are as a district. And my goal for the small phase 1A is to make the boardroom more reflecting of who we are today and where we're going to go, because this district accomplished a lot. This is a very unique district. We have a lot of things that we could be proud of, including our staff. So I would not be in favor to put the pictures back. If we have to, I'm willing to negotiate to put our founders back, the original directors. That we could definitely talk about. But ideally, I would really love to have the boardroom to reflect who we are today and where we are planning to go as a district. So with that, do we have any members of the public that wish to chime in on this issue? If you wish to do so, please raise your hand in the Zoom app or just speak out. Mr. Nishimura.
Yes. So a lot of good discussion. Now, a couple points. One is, I think one or more directors mentioned logo placement for video. I guess maybe I should preface this, from a rate-paying public, all these improvements do not bring me water. And if you just sort of look at it, I mean, they serve to increase the cost of my water. To that point, yes, you're a business, but you're a monopoly business, meaning that I don't, as a rate-paying public, I don't need to be advertised to by ACWD. Having the logo or the name plastered in front of me at every glance isn't going to determine whether or not I choose you as my water provider. I have no choice. There's that aspect to think about. And therefore the cost, right? So I am sensitive to the amount of money that's being spent to plaster the logo and or the name on multiple places. And to the point of the video, I mean, the technology exists that no matter what video angle is being shot, you could always have the ACWD logo in the lower right-hand corner. So if a director is concerned about marketing or being able to determine very at a glance what is being shown on the video and that's associated with ACWD, that can be done through the magic of electronics. As far as the content on the walls, the district does spend a considerable amount of effort on public outreach and education. And to the degree that such collateral material could be put on the back wall, I think would be a good thing. Of all the walls in the boardroom, the rear wall, or the wall that the board members face when they're in their normal seated position, is the most accessible. It is incrementally more difficult for the general public to access the sides, just due to the flow of the wall, flow of the circulation in the room, and just sort of how people mill in and out of the room. So the rear section of the boardroom, I think, is prime property, if you'd like to use that term, for public outreach and communication. And the suggestions that have been brought up are fine. A rotating display that has important information that's of public interest would be fine as well. Those are my inputs. Thank you.
President Wong, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I am. I was trying to use the space bar to unmute myself function. That didn't work. Thank you very much, Mr. Nishimura. With that, do you need more direction from us, Shireen, or do you have at least some concept where we think we should go?
I think I have some concept. I will go back and review all of my notes.
I think our goal for this evening was basically to receive final direction from the board and then go from there. So I think I heard very strongly that the majority of the board would like to see text on the dais and the logo on the back wall to the left. In terms of the recognition for former directors, it's a mixed bag. I counted 3 directors okay with a plaque with potentially small photos. I just want to remind the board that one of the reasons that we're talking about this is because of the sort of the demographics not matching the community that we serve. I can also remind the board that from a staff perspective and recruiting and all the things that we talked about, we do exams in this room. Our preference is, and I hate to say this, directors, but I'm a general manager, so I won't be in there either, is to acknowledge the history of the previous directors through the use of the plaque rather than the photos. And what we were thinking is preserve the original photos and you know, there'll be opportunities to do something with them, but we'll keep them preserved and then create a special place on our website with the photos and eventually bios of every director, which would probably get a lot more potential, you know, interest or views than it would in the actual boardroom. Because I think, you know, looking ahead, most members of the public will probably be attending our meetings virtually, you know, in the future. So I just want to throw it out there, you know, if staff goes ahead and does the plaque without the photos, is that a deal breaker for any director? I just want to double check there, because remember, this is not the first time that we talked about this issue with the board. And previously it was Director Sethi that really, really wanted to keep the photos. And Director Sethi opined the last time we brought this, you know, just a couple of months ago to the board, that he was happy with all the photos going away, providing that we did those other things. So I just want to poll the board to see if the photos go away, is that a deal breaker? Am I looking for another job or something?
My preference would be, and you know, this is no disrespect to anyone, but my preference would be that we don't keep the photos in the boardroom. And I think it's been suggested that we digitally upload them to the website or somewhere. So that would definitely be my preference.
Director Gunther?
I have visions of all the photos being packed in a crate and being rolled in with the Ark of the Covenant and Raiders of the Lost Ark. But I could live without the photos. I mean, I kind of still like the ideas because I like our history. I like history. I like the historic aspects. I understand what's being said. I certainly could live without them. They'll be you know, they'll be on the website or, you know, our website. And, you know, if people want to really delve into the history, then great. It'll be on there too. So.
And at some point, as Director Sethi mentioned, there might be an opportunity to have special displays. You know, we can pull them out and honor them that way. But in the meantime, all of your favorite classic directors will be safely in inert gas and preserved for posterity.
As we were joking earlier, with digital printing, we could do statues, you know, but just saying.
It depends if you want to be mounted on a horse or not in your statue, because that would be quite the look.
I prefer a elephant along the lines of Hannibal, maybe, or somewhere in that, Alexander the Great.
On that great note, Director Weed. Any preference?
John, I think you're muted.
I'm muted. Building up a digital library is a positive step and something I strongly encourage. In fact, it allows us to embellish the history. And photographs can always be put back in place if we have a nostalgic feeling in a future board that want to return and see their own glory being preserved in the line. And as time grows, that's going to be an extensive number of people. But so far, it's been a remarkably few. And when we go to district elections, we'll be able to put the names on the back of the chairs. One per district. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Weed. And as myself, I could definitely live without the pictures. So I think the direction is pretty clear, Mr. Shaver. I think it's just the plaque without the pictures, please.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that input, and I appreciate the board's trust on this issue. And the last thing is the collage. We received some feedback. Shireen, do you feel that you have enough feedback on the collage concept?
Well, as my notes, Director Akbari mentioned the rubber dam timeline was his preference, and Gunther mentioned the timeline as well, but
as well as historic photos. He's looking for awesome historic photos.
Was there a preference amongst the other directors regarding photo collage versus timeline?
Or if you're indifferent, that's okay too.
I like the timeline with the rubber dam, like Director Akbari.
The rubber dam is a pretty good picture, though. I'll give you that.
Director Wee?
One option is to spend the money because it has an operational potential. Is to have a digitized board that you can change at will and put whatever information you wish to on it, the giant screen, if you will.
Yeah, we can look into that. That wasn't what we were thinking, but we'll look into it and make sure that whatever we do doesn't preclude doing something like that in the future.
We might want to think about that in phase 2 because that would involve power.
Yeah, that's what I mean. We'll look into the complexity of it and you know, how we might be able to incorporate that either with this upgrade, if possible, or at least not preclude it for the next phase.
Right. And then in the future years, when you have the holograms of the individual board members sitting back at the podium.
You'll be coming back to board meetings like Obi-Wan Kenobi and telling us the best way to do it, I'm sure.
That's for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. I think staff has enough direction, right? I think that one we're leaning towards the timeline with the rubber dam. I believe that's where we are. All right. So with that, I think do you have anything else for us, Bob or Shereen?
Nope, that's all for me. Thank you.
Then we are done. Then shall we move on to item 6.3.3, State Water Project?
Yeah, just doing a quick time check. It's about 8:15. We have probably, how long would you say your presentation is, Laura?
I think it's about 10 slides. I can try and go through as quickly as possible.
That's probably about 15 minutes. And then the following two, I can probably do in, 20 minutes or so total. So you want to power through to the closed session, or would you like to take a break perhaps?
I was actually going to request a break if that's okay, just a short 5-minute break.
Why don't we take a break until 8:30? It's 8:18 right now, right? 12 minutes?
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Ari is back. I heard Director Gunther and Director Wee. Then let's resume the meeting. I believe next item is item 6.3.3.
Item 6.3.3, that is correct. And that involves a state water project water supply contract, water management amendment, and Ms. Heides will be presenting that.
Okay, please. Thank you, Mr. Shaver. Please hold on 1 minute here. I just gotta figure out how to get my screen shared here. Let's see. Share screen. Aha, there it is. And hopefully you will see it in presentation mode if I have figured this out this time. All right, here we go. I'm pleased to share an update on the State Water Project Water Supply Contract Water Management Amendment tonight. This is a briefing on an item that'll come to a future board meeting for the board's consideration and approval. So just a little bit of background leading up to this contract amendment. One of the key pieces is an agreement in principle that was negotiated between the California Department of Water Resources and the public water agencies that receive water from the State Water Project that took place in 2018. The goal of developing this AIP was to supplement and clarify terms of the State Water Project contract to allow for greater water management flexibility and to facilitate transfers and exchanges of State Water Project water. And benefits to the district of executing these things is greater flexibility to manage our own State Water Project water. And also it will provide some additional water management tools that we can take advantage of. So just a bit of a timeline. In June 2018, an agreement in principle was reached. In October 2018, the Department of Water Resources circulated an environmental impact report. At that time, the part of the agreement in principle, a second half of it was related to California Water Fix cost allocations. So you may recall that the governor in 2018 decided that a two-tunnel project was not the way to go. And so in May 2019, the project approval was withdrawn for the California Water Fix. And at that time, the agreement between DWR and the public water agencies was to, and a public negotiation meeting was held. And it was agreed that the California Water Fix cost allocation sections from the AIP would be removed. And following that, an environmental impact report was subsequently amended and recirculated, which brings us now to August 2020, just shortly ago, when DWR issued a project approval and notice of determination to move the water management tools portion of the agreement in principle and related contract amendment forward. So just a few highlights of the water management contract itself. And this is an amendment to the existing state water project contract that we've held with DWR for many years. But the amendment would allow for exchanges, make some amendments to Article 56. It would simply clarify existing practices going on already. And then a new Article 57 would be added to the contract to allow for multi-year transfers. And this adds new flexibility and tools for both single-year transfers and multi-year transfers. Still, as it stands today, DWR review and approval would be required for any transfers and exchanges. And just one thing to keep in mind, while ACWD would be ultimately considering this amendment for our own contract, it's intended to be a common amendment for all agencies that participate in the state water project and have the same language added to all the contracts. A bit more on exchanges. The amendment would change the existing Article 56 to confirm the exchange provisions for water exchange between public water agencies. It sets exchange ratios based on water allocations that would be up to 5-to-1. It sets the maximum amount of cost compensation for exchanges. And it also allows the exchanges to be effectuated over 10 years. On the transfer front, which as you heard tonight, we've executed our first transfer this year that was fairly exciting, or set of transfers. So this new Article 57 that would be added to our contract creates new flexibility for non-permanent transfers. It removes the turnback pool as the only non-permanent water transfer mechanism. And I should note that the turnback pool itself is something that we haven't used a lot. And when we have used it, it hasn't resulted in a lot of water for the district. So these two things are changes that we think will be beneficial. Because in the past, you could only do either the turnback pool or you could do a permanent transfer of your state water project water, but then you could not get it back. So this new article also allows water agencies to set the compensation for transfers. It requires certain conditions to be met to avoid having any impacts on state water project operations or other contractors. And this is something that's important to all the contractors, that we aren't impacting each other. And it also requires that any transfer, as is the case now, will still require DWR approval. Additionally, the amendment would change Article 21 and allow for a limited ability to transfer Article 21 water consistent with other transfer rules. And that wouldn't necessarily apply to us, but to some of the agricultural contractors. Other provisions that the new contract amendment would allow are it would allow us to store groundwater, or we already store groundwater outside of the service area, as you know. It would allow for that water stored outside of the service area to be transferred or exchanged to another public water agency without having to return first to our service area. So that may open up some opportunities for us with our semi-tropic groundwater bank. Also, it allows up to 50% of certain carryover water storage in San Luis Reservoir to be transferred or exchanged You heard a little bit about San Luis tonight, and so this may open up some additional opportunities there for us. It allows storage and transfer of table A water in the same year. In the past, you know, it was more limited in what we could do. This will allow more flexibility. And it also adds provisions to provide transparency, which was something very important in moving this process forward. So all transfers and exchanges would be subject to various rules and have full transparency. The amendment also adds a dispute resolution process if an agency claims that a transfer or exchange will cause them harm. So that's also an important piece. The effective date of this amendment, which again would be common to all agencies, would become effective when 24 public water agencies sign it. And if 24 agencies haven't signed by next February, DWR may allow it to move forward and be effective for the agencies that have signed, even if not all have signed by that time. And because the board will be considering this at a future meeting, and there's a number of CEQA activities that have gone on related to this project, and or the project being the contract amendment, and I wanted to make sure we provided you with the information ahead that would be considered. So DWR to date has done a number of activities in recent times related to the California Environmental Quality Act. They circulated a partially recirculated draft environmental impact report, or DEIR, earlier this spring. They certified the final EIR on August 25th of this year. They adopted CEQA finding of fact and statement of overriding considerations along with that. And they also filed a notice of determination for this contract amendment project on August 28th, 2020. All of the materials that DWR has made available to the public are on the website that you see here. And additionally, according to the California Environmental Quality Act, when taking a future action as a responsible agency by executing this contract amendment in the future, should the district choose to do so, ACWD would be required to review and consider the certified final EIR and the CEQA finding of fact and statement of overriding considerations. So materials will be made available on ACWD's website and to the board in the future as we consider this contract amendment. So next steps, agencies, in addition to ourselves, will be considering approval of the water management contract amendment this fall, and we will be bringing a future action item to the board to consider approval of the amendment and to take related CEQA actions as a responsible agency should we move this project forward. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments from the board?
I'll certainly have some, but there are the other comments first. You mentioned the ability to transfer among public water agencies. Does that go beyond the contractors, that we can contract with other water agencies that are not state water contractors?
Very good question, and I should have qualified that early on. The contract amendment applies to the other state water contractors for all of us to be able to transfer and exchange water amongst ourselves. So it's not necessarily an opportunity for us to sell that water to other agencies. And in the negotiations and in the contracting agreements, you'll see that DWR refers to all the state water contracting agencies as public water agencies. So my apologies for the confusion on that terminology.
In addition to the state water contractors, you have at least one subcontractor, which is Vandenberg Air Force Base, 4,500 acre feet a year. I did some studies around that. I've suggested that Bosca investigate the ability to become a subcontractor of the state water project and be able to tap into these water transfer agreements. So I encourage in our discussions that we put that on the table and see, or at least keep it in mind as you're talking to the various agencies to see if that could be of assistance. Next, you know, this is there were some issues that I had raised earlier when we signed an extension to the state water contract. that were not addressed from the Campbell board. And among those was the ability to get the state to take responsibility for Vallecita's channel as part of the state water project. So if that is at all open to discussion, I would like to keep that at least as an option on the table. It'd save us a lot of money or give us a different source of funding to pay for it. Next, I'm glad to see this. It's part of the solution. We have 100 million acre feet of water in the state of California. We give half of it to the environment, 40%, a little over 40%, but the M&I is only 9 million acre feet, of which a portion of that is a state water project. So there's a lot of water out there. And rather than, just went through a study, an urban water management plan that looked at various physical projects, but if we could transfer the water, none of that effort would be needed, none of that cost would be needed. We could buy the water when we needed it. And so to the extent that it strikes me that the real studies for urban water management should be to look at the capacity and reliability of the pipelines and aqueducts. With that emphasis, we can save ourselves, our ratepayers, hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions. So keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Reed. Director Gunther, Director Akbari.
Yeah, I think the new transfers, this is really a good deal. I don't necessarily agree with Director Weed 100% on the it's going to get us out of the woods for projects, but I think, and we kind of proved this back during the drought, that being able to move water effectively, it does help. And it also helps the environment because we could use less and we have to store less. But if we can move it around, I'm really interested in this. I hope it plays out. I think we should sign off. We'll see.
If I could tap into one other issue, if I feel it's finished. Article 21 water is your least cost. That's your overflow floodwaters. And the ability to capture that, particularly when you have existing storage like Del Val, I think is an extraordinary opportunity. And we have at least 7,500 acre feet of storage that we have allocated to us. If we can maximize that storage using Article 21 and then recharge our groundwater basin with that, we'd be well ahead of the game. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Weed. Director Akbari.
Director Weed actually asked my question about the water transfers, so I don't have any additional questions, but I think this is a positive step forward. So thank you for breaking it down for us today.
Yeah, and I would like to echo that. Thank you, Laura. I really like all the lists under other provisions that definitely give us a lot more flexibility. So I am just going to see if there are any members of the public that wish to address the board at this point. If you have questions on this item or wish to address the board, can you raise your hand through the Zoom app or just speak up? Seeing and hearing none, I believe all the directors have opined. Last minute comments, questions. If not, I am just going to say thank you to Ms. Heides for the great presentation and move on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Heides. All right, I believe we are on to General Manager's report, Mr. Shaver.
Yes, thank you, President Wong. I do have a couple of presentations that I would like to make, and then we have one announcement by Ms. Heides. So I'll start with the COVID-19 pandemic presentation, and I think Gina will get that up and running. Okay, so what I've been doing is providing periodic updates at regular board meetings as we are almost ready to celebrate, tongue-in-cheek, our 7th month in emergency operations since the beginning of the pandemic. Next slide, please. So as I have been doing, I'll talk a little bit about the operating environment, our current operational status, and what we plan on doing in the future. Next slide. So this is just a quick review of our 3 primary objectives. That's to balance out keeping employees safe, continuing to provide the essential services that we do, and support employees and their families that may be experiencing health-related or childcare challenges as a result of the pandemic. Next slide. So in terms of count of cases as well as deaths, sadly, the numbers continue to rise in California. However, in Alameda County, we're doing better. I'll comment on that in a moment. And I also wanted to express, again, appreciation for the board's supportive staff, as at the last board meeting, you authorized extending the benefits that we already have provided to employees to essentially through the school year. So what that means is employees can, sort of plan ahead and manage how they utilize the benefits that the board has so graciously provided. Next slide. As I mentioned, conditions are generally improving in Alameda County. We have officially moved to the state's red status, and the county is considering reopening for elementary schools on a very limited basis and providing that there's a plan to do so. Hotels, libraries, gyms, museums, zoos, and aquariums may now also reopen, again, though, in a very limited capacity. Wanted to inform the board, the fires that have been occurring have created air quality concerns, and that peaked on September 11th, which was a Friday, in the afternoon, where we actually called in field employees and sent them home because the air quality index exceeded 200. So we don't have a hard number on the 200 as long as we provide N95 masks and employees are required to wear them above that number. That's what we've been doing, but we also look at the forecast, and it did look pretty bad there for a while, and we didn't want to expose employees to those hazardous conditions any more than we need to. However, we also need to continue performing emergency work and those kind of things, and that's why it's good also to have the N95 masks. There's also been earthquakes because 2020's got it all going on. Thankfully, though, there's been no damage, but there's been several in the area of the new Calaveras Dam. And then we also have societal issues in terms of homeless, specifically at the old Alameda Creek, and Supervisor Valier has gotten involved with that, and Kurt Ahrens is our liaison with that group, including the mayor of Union City. And then Laura's going to talk a little bit about the Niles Community Park area and give you an update on that a little later. In terms of operational status, I was concerned about employees continuing to wear masks, especially in the warmer weather. And so what we have done is reinforced our mask policy so it does provide for progressive discipline in the event that employees are not wearing masks correctly. Thankfully, I think employees have gotten the message, and also it's helped some of the national news, I believe, to show that anybody can get impacted by COVID-19. So in my unscientific sort of observation, I'm seeing, pretty much 100% compliance with mask policy, except for myself, because one day I did walk out of my office without a mask on because I just spaced on it. And then I saw a bunch of employees and I literally turned around and ran the other way like, ah! So I think, though, employees definitely have gotten the message and understand that it's really for their own protection. Although, nobody likes wearing masks. That is a sure thing. In terms of guidance to employees, they have been informed that we do not see a major return to the office. And of course, there's no guarantees, but at least until the end of the fiscal year. I just don't see it happening. And then I'll just provide another update at the November regular meeting. So if there's no questions, I'm happy to go to the next presentation, or I'm also happy to respond to any questions or concerns.
Questions for Mr. Shaver?
John, an issue we had some email traffic on earlier today. I would hope that in our COVID-19 that we look at and develop some concepts on testing of individuals and family members. And one of those opportunities that strikes me is the flu shot, if not with the contractor doing the flu shots, with another contractor, given the location. It strikes me that in every report I've heard on coming out of this, testing frequently and nearly universally has got to be part of the solution. So again, I would hope that we could incorporate that in our plan.
Thank you, Director Reed. I would like to ask Mr. Shaver for clarification. I believe we offer testing to our employees. They could voluntarily choose to go get COVID-19 testing, and we actually did not have that many takers. Is that correct?
Yes, earlier in the pandemic, we had priority status with the city's test centers, and the executive staff did go get tested because we wanted to see what the experience really was and wanted to make sure that employees know that it's a safe and not painful experience. But very, very few employees have taken advantage of that testing. And all ACWD employees have health coverage, so they can go to their own providers as well as take advantage of the community-based testing that's available to employees. My concern about doing COVID testing here is that based on that experience, I don't believe that employees would take advantage of it and do it voluntarily unless they are experiencing some symptoms and they want to know, or they feel that they've been exposed. And frankly, we don't want those employees coming to the work environment. And again, they have other areas and other places that they can get tested. And doing a one-off test as part of the flu shot program that we're doing, will just let employees or anybody who takes advantage of it know what their current status is, but 24 hours later, it can be completely different unless you do testing, way more frequently than just a one-off test. We have no plans to do that. That's not included in the federal, state, or Alameda County Health Department recommendations. And so for those reasons, staff's assessment is that would be what Director Weed is suggesting is not something that we're considering at this point. But obviously, if there's concerns by the board, staff would reconsider its current position.
It strikes me that this is a disease that's far more lethal than the flu. And if we're going to give flu shots to family members, we should also offer them the opportunity for testing, particularly to the family members.
The CDC is recommending flu shots. They're more important than ever. And that's why we decided to do it. And I made the decision to go ahead and get a company to do the flu shots for us, but we really had no idea how many employees or family members or board members would take advantage of it this year because so many employees are teleworking. They might prefer to go to their own health providers. So I did get a count from Corinne, who's managing the program earlier today, and we guaranteed 100 because that was their minimum. And they're about $35 a shot, so it's not too expensive. And if you prevent one employee from getting the flu, that might be worth $3,500. But I am happy to report that so far 86 people have signed up. So I'm pretty confident that we're going to get really close to the 100 number.
Oh, I'll be number 87 on that list. And so it's a great program. It just strikes me that COVID-19 is a greater threat, and that 80% of the people infected with COVID-19 are asymptomatic. So I would also encourage us to engage a public health professional to advise the district on how to best address COVID-19 and particularly recover and as we go back into full operation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wee. Any other directors wish to comment on this issue?
Along the lines of testing, I'm really support testing. I think there's a lot of different options out there at the moment that are being developed. And if we can get to a point where, there's the option, some of these are now relatively inexpensive, they're relatively quick response. It might be worth looking into. You're right, the news, it hits home fast. The Coast Guard Admiral that contaminated the Joint Chiefs is my classmate. So Charlie Ray, I wish him very well. And so, it hit a guy at work, close friend of mine. So far, so good. We're all still here. But yeah, it's something we shouldn't take for granted. It's interesting to see how these things transmit. I won't be taking part with the flu shot because I'm already done.
Thank you, Director Ganther. Director Akbari?
Well, I appreciate the update, and like Director Gunther, I've got my flu shot, so I won't be signing up, but I'm glad to hear that a lot of our district employees have already signed up. I had a question, a little bit unrelated, but it was on slide 5, so I feel comfortable asking right now. You talked about some of the homeless/watershed issues, and particularly around Old Alameda Creek and Niles Community Park. Can you give us a quick update on what remediation efforts we've made so far, and how the coordination has worked with other parties?
So like I mentioned, Laura will give an update on the Niles Canyon staging area site. So I won't steal her thunder. And I also mentioned that Kurt Ahrens is our liaison for the Old Alameda Creek area. And I know he's plugged into that, and it's been sort of a process, and I'll let Kurt provide you all with an update on where we are there.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Shaver. We did have a meeting that was hosted by Supervisor Valle, included the mayor of Union City and several others in the county. It was really a kickoff and coordination effort where the different agencies report on their different programs and trying to coordinate basically the different housing programs and social service programs. There isn't a big push at this time until they can get more, I guess, services in place to support the homeless people in that area. There's a concern when they push them out, it causes more problems than having them in that area in general. So there's ongoing meetings. We haven't had another meeting since that initial kickoff, but the county's looking at what resources they can bring to it and coordinating with both Fremont and Union City to try to get the efforts and the services lined up to service that community. So more to come, but at this point, there's just been that one coordination meeting and then independent discussions beyond that.
Yeah, and I can also report that Supervisor Valle's office contacted me and requested a map of the Old Alameda Creek area and who's responsible for the various parcels out there, and I provided that. I think it was early last week. So they seem to be, sort of lining things up. And the estimate in that area of the number of homeless people was around 70. So that's a lot. But when you look at Alameda County as a whole and the homeless population, you know, it's such a huge issue countywide.
The big danger in there, that I'm very familiar with that area, and I driven by it frequently. It's growing, and I know the neighbors' concerns there. Well, they've had break-ins. It's not very pleasant over there. It's an issue. Meetings are fine, but the neighbors are looking for something to happen, and they've had a couple of fires. The camps or this area butts right up to many homes. So I think, Bob, you know my position on it. I understand there's issues and it's difficult. But I do know that it's also starting to extend down the creek trail. And I know COVID has been a problem, but I think the general public is getting upset. Regardless, there have been a couple of assaults on the creek trail. People I know, and I'm also very familiar with this area here. And there's another section of the trail where it goes under 880, and my neighbors told me do not even go there. So this is a really big problem and getting worse.
Yeah, and so I think Union City and the County of Alameda, they have resources. I think they're getting motivated and will report periodically back to the board on how it's going. I have committed ACWD and our resources to assist with this effort, but this is a bigger problem than ACWD can handle for sure.
Right.
Thank you. And I guess for me, I have my flu shot, so thank you. You don't need to pump me in. In terms of COVID-19, I am definitely a little bit torn. I know the importance of testing. However, I also don't want to have a potentially ill employee come into the office to get tested. It just increases the chance of the rest of our employees getting COVID. Then we need to talk a little bit about the purpose of the testing. What purpose does it serve? What are we trying to accomplish? Overall, as a society or as a community, we could take the test and know when to self-isolate. But testing when coming into the office, the effectiveness is kind of questionable, right? Let's look at the president. He was infected with COVID-19, but it's really strict. Everybody who wants to talk to the president needs to be tested and needs to have a negative COVID-19 test, antibody test. But he was still infected. So, we need to think long and hard about what we're trying to accomplish with this test and how to conduct it safely for the rest of our employees before we proceed down that path. So I would recommend that we just keep on monitoring and trying to figure out what's the best path forward for the district at this point in time.
Yeah, and staff's position is not set in stone, as different kinds of tests and tests that have that employees can self-administer or have a much less period of time to get the results, because that's huge too. We're certainly open to reevaluating, but I just wanted to mention kind of where we are right now.
Just keep an eye out, keep on monitoring, and there may be a time it will be appropriate for us to do the test, to administer the test. I don't know at this point in time, but it is something that's good to keep an eye out on.
If I can make a comment that I think my prediction is it will become mandatory or a condition of employment as we move forward, given the lethality of the disease. We do already have tuberculosis tests required in many locations. COVID-19 is far more dangerous.
It could be, and that actually would make our life a little bit easier, because if my guess is correct, in order to make a test mandatory in our district, we have to negotiate and bargain.
That's correct. And to date, the union has expressed opposition to any mandatory testing.
Right. But that will be overcome by legislation, I suspect.
And that actually could work out for us, right? So at this point, I suggest we just monitor and keep track of it and there might be appropriate time to pull the trigger. We don't know. So keep
I
an
think
eye out.
I think we should also be looking, the vaccines are going to be coming. And that is another thing, I think, particularly for our frontline guys, to be available if we can certainly get in line.
And I think we have made the case to, the health and safety workers in our area that ACWD employees are essential employees. That's why we were able to get priority testing. So it's my hope that once a safe and effective vaccine is developed, that our employees would have some sort of priority.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. Emphasis placed on safe, please. There's some rush about getting some vaccine out. I just want to make sure that our employees are protected, please. All right. On that, let's move on to the next item. The CUA technical assistance.
Yeah, California Urban Water Agencies, or CUA, Technical Assistance Program. This is an exciting brand new program that I'm really pleased to be able to bring to the board's attention. This has been going on in the background for several years now. And, you're all aware that in the state of California, there are areas in the state where there exist serious water accessibility and affordability issues. Many in the Central Valley, many are disadvantaged communities. And there is an opportunity for California Urban Water Agencies, again, CUA, to assist these water agencies in an interesting and new way. And so I wanted to talk about those two issues as well as our own interests when it comes to these issues apart from CUA, and wanted to emphasize that I'm not asking for any board action this evening. This is an informational presentation primarily, but if you have any comments or input, I'm willing to take that as well. Next slide. So these slides are relatively dense. I apologize for that, but because we really haven't reviewed many of these issues in detail with the board before, I wanted you to have a record of this and also a public record. So as the board is aware, since about 2012, basically access to safe and clean water has been considered a human right in the state of California. And it has been estimated that about 1 million Californians don't have this, sometimes because of water accessibility and sometimes because of water quality issues. And there are hundreds of public water systems that are regulated by the state that do not meet safe drinking standards. Sometimes it's acute issues like a one-off thing, and sometimes it's chronic. And the state's very much aware of this. And as you recall, in 2019, Governor Newsom, as part of the budget process, proposed a water tax on urban water users. It would be placed a fee on the bills. And the idea was that would provide consistent revenue to deal with mostly the operations issues associated with helping these systems, because there is bond funding and other sources of funding for some of the capital issues. Next slide. As you recall, both the Association of California Water Agencies, or ACWA, and ACWD both opposed the proposed water tax. And the reason why ACWD opposed it was, as the board discussed earlier today, in our own service area, we know that we have our own low-income customers that struggle to pay water bills. And what this pie chart shows is that there are way more low-income people in the urban areas of the state served by CUA agencies. CUA agencies serve about 2/3 of all Californians with water than there are in the disadvantaged primarily rural areas. So the idea of putting a water tax that would go on the bill of these urban customers who are struggling to meet their own financial needs to help the Californians in the rural areas, that didn't fly at least with me personally, and I think with some of you on the board. So we opposed that, and other water agencies felt the same way, and eventually that was dropped. And so sort of almost in parallel, there was legislation, SB 200, a Monning bill, that basically was proposing to use revenue from the state's greenhouse gas reduction fund to fund an annual fund of up to $130 million per year to start addressing some of these issues in these disadvantaged communities. Next slide. So out of that, because that became law of the land, the State Water Resources Control Board established what they called the SAFER program, which stands for Safe and Affordable Funding for Equity and Resilience. Very clever. And the state board, their charge is to implement the requirements of SB 200. And so they are responsible for identifying public water systems as well as domestic wells that they consider at risk. And there's a SAFER board or a work group that has been developed, and KUA actually has a representative on that. So when you come up with the metrics that determine what water agencies are at risk, it's good that the urban water agencies have a voice in that conversation, because you want to invest limited resources in areas that will make the biggest bang for the buck. And there's a difference between having a total, coliform violation one time versus having a chronic, pesticide or arsenic issue in your groundwater. So the state board is to proactively target these at-risk systems and then provide assistance to help them get their feet on the ground and to meet their charge to supply safe water to their communities that they serve. And there's different tools that are available. Could be a consolidation among systems. Some of them don't have the economy of scale to even be financially sustainable. So sometimes you need to make a bigger agency or merge it with a adjacent agency. Some of them don't have local expertise. They're very remote. And so they don't really have the ability locally to do this. And the state board is, a regulatory agency primarily. They're not really set up to go in and take over a water system. So next slide, please. So they have established a technical assistance provider program. And this is something that the KUA agencies have been following and opining on in policy papers to try to say, hey, these are issues that are important and they need to be, I lost my video feed here. Stand by.
Looks like we lost Mr. Shaver. So Laura, while we're waiting for Bob, Bob referenced to the fact that you'll be making an update later in the presentation. Will you be making it as a part of the general manager's report?
In fact, I was going to just make a brief verbal update under GM report, so I can do that now if you'd like.
Yeah, why don't we do that while Bob sorts out his video?
I
Okay,
think I'm
great.
back. Can you hear me?
Good.
Oh, good.
Welcome.
Sorry about that.
Welcome
Everything went cattywampus. So anyway, as I was saying, KUA has about 2/3 of the state's population in its member agencies. There are 11 agencies. And in 2017, KUA published a white paper on this issue with strategies to deal with the growing issue of water supply and water quality issues in disadvantaged communities in the Central Valley. And more recently, actually published a Water Research Foundation report that contains a strategy for dealing with these issues. And the strategy was three-pronged. First of all, development in areas that don't have a water plan that is, functional and sustainable should not happen. So there are areas of the state, say in Fresno County, I'll just paint a picture for you, where the city of Fresno is a maybe surprisingly, but it's a well-run city that does have issues, but they have a good water system and they're doing fine there. But then in the unincorporated county around the city, the county has different politics and they allow development to occur that really will have unsustainable water. It's based on paper water. And then the city of Fresno is asked down the road to go ahead and consolidate with these unsustainable systems at the cost of its ratepayers. So there's this stop the bleeding kind of thing where there really needs to be land use planning that actually has valid water supply planning associated with it. And unfortunately, that doesn't occur everywhere like it does here in Alameda County. The other thing is to improve water quality, use different strategies, things like packaged treatment plants, unattended plants, plants that can be monitored remotely, and then focus efforts on areas in where there could be the biggest difference and the most people can benefit. So next slide, please. So we were thinking as KUA that, it's really hard for urban agencies to provide assistance to these areas of the state. So we were thinking maybe we could do it on a mutual aid basis, similar to like how ACWD sent employees to Paradise after the fire. I just lost my video feed again. Oh, okay, there it is. And so we approached the state board with that concept, and the state board said, hey, why don't you apply to be a technical assistance provider in the SAFER program, which we didn't think about. And this way you can advance, ideas on how to help these systems. And the urban water agencies of the state have the expertise and the sophistication to perhaps make a difference. So we could leverage that knowledge. So KUA put together a proposal, next page, in which the KUA itself, a nonprofit, would have an agreement with the state board. Can you go back? But KUA staff is Brown and Caldwell, the consulting firm. So use KUA staff to help with the administrative and management aspects of this. But the agreement would be between KUA and the state board, And then KUA would also have master services agreements with contractors that would actually potentially assist some of these systems that need assistance. And the way it would work is the state board, after an agreement is made, would look at what kind of assistance is needed and then propose to the technical assistance provider that they think could help out the best a scope of work to assist. And then the funding from this would be from the SB 200 funding. So there would be no ACWD funding involved. We would not be able to directly benefit from this program. And there might be minimal in-kind services that we would provide, but if it became more than that, potentially our costs would be reimbursed. So it'd be consistent with Prop 218. There's also an issue with KUA staff being Brown and Caldwell, that Brown and Caldwell itself cannot award work to itself. So the KUA agencies would be responsible through the use of committees to award work to these contractors that would generally be based in the areas that that they would do the work in. So you want to use local consultants and other firms that could make a difference. So it's pretty innovative. KUA's never done anything like this before. It's 11 big water agencies working together. The board of directors of KUA has not approved this yet. And we just received the template agreement from the state board in terms of what would be involved. Next slide. So I just wanted to kind of give you an overview of the kind of services that KUA would be providing. There would be no construction services because, again, KUA wasn't really set up to be like that. So it'd be planning, assessment, maybe assisting with operations. There could be a scheme where ACWD could potentially send operators to assist in a situation like this, because operators know what they're doing and they have good knowledge and expertise. So like it could be, now I'm just thinking out of the box, but imagine, because we always have challenges when getting new operators up to speed to operate our facilities, because it takes a while. So it could be some sort of scheme in which I come back to the board and say, hey, we would like to send an operator or two to this remote place in the Central Valley for a period of 6 months, but we would like to also hire a couple of operators as early replacements for operators that say are going to retire. So it could be a win-win thing where we're bringing on board additional resources, but it's not really costing us anything. And then the operators that are getting experience helping out these areas that really can use it, it can be good for morale, it can be good for experience. So there's different potential possibilities here that we don't really know yet because we don't know what the technical assistance kind of scope would look like. And KUA has the ability to not accept every request that the state board makes. You get an opportunity to assess it and say, hey, can we do this or not? And go from there. So also we could look at financial issues to determine whether or not a system is sustainable. So this could involve a combination of Brown and Caldwell as well as agency staff working together. Next slide, please. So, of course, there are issues. I mentioned one of them. It's something that KUA has never done before. So whenever you're being innovative, that brings in a certain level and degree of risk, right? Because something may not work out as well as you hope. But it is innovative, and the budget could be significant. The draft agreement that's been developed with the state board is $8 million for 2 years with the possibility of extending it. So $4 million a year in services is, it's a decent amount of scope and potentially enough to make a difference for some of these areas of the state. As I mentioned, Brown and Caldwell would administer most of the program. We wanted to do this because, face it, we're in a pandemic ourselves. All the agencies have limited bandwidth. And so it's a way of leveraging this relationship with KUA. And again, to set this up in a way that there is no conflict of interest. I mentioned the future potential opportunities for ACWD staff, just one example. And this is new to our council as well, because the things are starting to move. And so earlier this week, I provided him with a package of information. And the idea is ACWD's council will review this, because guess who the current chair on the KUA board is? That's me. So I want to make sure that ACWD is insulated from any of these risks that could happen when you embark on an innovative program like this. Contra Costa Water District is also having their general counsel review it. And the reason is that Steve Welch, their general manager, is the vice chair. So because we have one-year terms, Contra Costa would be assuming the role of chair next fiscal year. And therefore, we felt it would be good to have councils review it from our agency's perspective. KUA is going to retain an attorney to review the agreement and the terms on behalf of KUA, the organization. And Brown and Caldwell has their own attorney as well. So that's just getting started. And my guess is that the executive director of KUA will ask the board at the next board meeting, which is in a couple of weeks, I believe, to consider conditional approval of an agreement with the state board, providing that the review of the terms of the agreement and the various lawyers looking at this concur. Next slide. So I think this is pretty exciting. I think it's an opportunity for ACWD to sort of hit above its weight in a way in which we don't really have to spend many of our own resources on this, but there could be opportunities to strategically use this program for win-wins even within our own organization. So as I mentioned, this is just a report. KUA is an independent organization. They're going to do what they're going to do, but I certainly would not want to go down this road too far if the ACWD board had major concerns or ACWD council has any major concerns without resolving those first. Any questions?
Questions or comments from the board?
Quick question, John Weed. You had a slide that said domestic wells. Is this program limited to public and investor-owned water systems, or individual domestic wells where there might be a problem?
So as currently configured, we would be working with utilities, not any domestic wells for this phase. Again, the idea is bang for the buck.
Okay. And on this, we'll have some talk separately about some domestic wells, including some in our immediate area where the practice has been when somebody gets ill, they go pour a bottle of bleach into the well and then move along. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Weed. Director Gunther, Director Akbari, any questions for Shaver?
I fully support it. I think it's a way we could help. We have a lot of expertise, but also if we're having our people, particularly if we have our people there, this is an opportunity to have people know who we are. So when the Hayward Fault decides to let go, there may be opportunities here to arrange or talk to these other, if we're working with an agency, particularly somebody out in the valley who may not be affected by the Hayward Fault, they're close. They could get here by ground. So anything that we can do to help, and the other thing is the right thing to do.
Thank you, Director Gunther.
I'll keep it really brief. I'm supportive. I think this is a great opportunity for us, and having the ability to ensure some more reliability in terms of water delivery systems, even at other agencies where it's desperately needed, I think is a net benefit to everybody involved. So I'm definitely supportive of the program.
Thank you, Director Akbari. And as for me, I think this is a great creative idea to offer technical assistance. So thank you, Mr. Shaver, for bringing it back to us.
You're welcome, and I'll keep the board informed if we are able to enter into an agreement, and then I'll give you periodic updates.
Thank you. And with that, any other general managers report items?
As I mentioned, Laura Heides, unless this was covered while I was on the other side somewhere, was going to give a brief update on the Niles Canyon staging area trash issue.
Great, thank you, Mr. Shaver. And as I believe the board's aware, there have been some significant issues with trash in recent times and passersby and whatnot in the Niles Canyon staging area. It has been a long-standing issue in that over the years, with homeless and trash and things that we really think has been exacerbated this summer with the COVID restrictions and not a lot of places to go, and it being sort of an attractive place with water and such for people to enjoy. So one of the big challenges out there is that it's basically a mishmash of jurisdictions. We don't actually own property there, but a number of other agencies are involved even in that small area. And so that is part of why there's been some challenges over the recent months in ensuring appropriate cleanup and whatnot, even just with huge numbers of folks visiting the site and accessing the creek. So we've done a little bit of outreach to some of our partners to get a little more info on the situation and as it currently stands, and also been kind of keeping an eye on the location. And what we've done is we'll be convening a meeting next week with various partners to discuss how we might collectively be able to move forward in a positive direction on this. As I mentioned, we don't own property right in that area, but I think we're in a position where, of course, our interest in maintaining water quality in the creek, both for our own drinking water purposes and for fish, is certainly an important aspect of keeping the area protected and clean, as well as certainly we have a concern for fires. And we've shared that with various stakeholders before, and so we're looking forward to convening the group next week to talk about how we might move forward on things. Ironically, we understand from some of our conversations that it's, as was mentioned about Old Alameda Creek, significant homeless challenges. It sounds like in this area, there isn't quite as much of that, simply because there's so much just routine use of people coming in and out that there's not as many people that are necessarily using it as a more permanent place right now. So, but that is part of why there is a significant amount of trash, unfortunately. So I look forward to bringing back an update on how that meeting goes and what we might be able to do moving forward in partnership with our other local agencies.
Laura, just for info, if you're going to be going to this, I've had reports coming out from Niles, the railroad out there, that by the first bridge, the first railroad bridge going out the canyon, there's a camp there. They've tied stuff off the tracks apparently to help them get up and down off the creek, and they may also be using some of the pathways that the contractors were establishing to do the cleanup. So that may come up. I believe they're still out there. I personally haven't seen or walked out there or looked at it, but it was a little disturbing to hear they had actually tied into the railroad ties and the tracks with ropes to assist to get up and down the creek bed. but there also appears to be some, possibly the using the, certainly Old Canyon Road and the actual, like I said, the places that the contractor was using to access certain areas that normally weren't accessed.
Thank you. I will note that. Thank you.
John Weed, I encourage you to Google the Austin, Texas approach where they actually hired homeless to do much of the cleanup and found that relatively effective. Second, the fact that UP has a fellow named Timothy Barron who's responsible for the homeless cleanup in Northern California. I give you his name and number. I've had some dealings because I have about 1,400 feet of frontage that had a homeless problem with debris being shifted back and forth. So I'll relay that number if that's helpful to you. They have the crews and equipment to go in and assist if it's near the railroad right away.
Thank you.
I'll just make a quick comment. I just wanted to express my appreciation to Laura, Kurt, Bob, and everyone who's been involved in the response, because I know we've gotten a lot of messages, and some of them have come through me about these issues, and so I appreciate what you guys have done, and I understanding that it's difficult to coordinate some of these response efforts as well, and I think more people are coming to ACWD with their concerns because we have a reputation as being responsive. And in this case, it's both a blessing and a curse because we don't have full jurisdiction here. But I just wanted to make it known that I personally appreciate the work that our staff has put in to try and remediate these issues.
Thank you, Mr. Akbari, and also my thanks to Ms. Haitis and Mr. Arendt for being so responsive to the comments and email requests we have received, and thank you for the update. With that, do we have any other general managers report items?
No, that's it.
All right, perfect. Then let's move on to item 7, director's comments, reports on meetings attended, or an agenda item request. Who wants to start? Director Wee, since you're on mute, would you like to start?
I've attended a number of webinars courtesy of Aquin. I don't know if we're to report on those. I'd be happy to if that becomes the issue. Generally, they've been on personnel related, HR related issues.
It's not required to make a report on an item unless you had expenses associated with it.
In some of these cases, I think the district picked up a $25 or $30 registration fee, Aqua collecting money to keep their places going. So what I'll do, I think in the future then is start keeping brief notes and have them ready to go on the various issues. One of those a while back was WIFIA and the potential funding there. So it's a great loan guarantee program, and I encourage us to consider it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wee. Director Gunther.
I have nothing tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Akbari.
I will just reiterate my my request as if we can go back to looking at expanding the eligibility criteria for the Help on Tap program. Now that we've expanded the bill credit, I would probably suggest we wait a little bit before we bring it back to the board, but that's something that I would certainly want us to consider once we have an idea of how much budget we still have given the increased benefit that we just approved tonight.
Thank you, Director Akbari, and nothing from me. So with that, I believe we conclude item 7, director's comment, reports on meeting attended, and agenda item requests. So next couple items are closed session items. Item 8.1 is pursuant to California Government Code Section 54956.9D2, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, one potential case. Item 8.2 is pursuant to California Government Code Section 54956.8, conference with real property negotiators, property N3 cattle company consisting of 131 parcels and approximately 50,535 acres in Alameda County, Santa Clara County, San Joaquin County, and Stanislaus County. Assessors' parcel numbers were furnished by owner's representative and are attached to this agenda. Agency negotiators, Robert Shaver and Ed Stevenson. Negotiating parties, N3 Cattle Company, LLC, Rand Jr. and Rand Jr. Trustee. Under negotiation, price and terms of payment. So with that, we should move to the closed session, and I believe Ms. Marcoux will do her magic and send us into a breakout room. And now it's about 9:44. Back, and I think all the directors are back, and it's about 10:41. The board has returned from closed session. And are we ready? Yes, I think Gina is recording. Okay. So for item 8.1, pursuant to California Government Code Section 54956.9D2, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, one potential case. No action was taken. Item 8.2, pursuant to California Government Code Section 54956.8, conference with real property negotiators, property, N3 Cattle Company consisting of 131 parcels and approximately 50,535 acres in Alameda County, Santa Clara County, San Joaquin County, and Stanislaus County. Assessors' parcel numbers were furnished by owner's representative and are attached to this agenda. Agency negotiators, Robert Shaver and Ed Stevenson. Negotiating parties, N3 Cattle Company, LLC, Rand Jr. Trustee. Under negotiation, price and term of payment. The board received report from agency negotiator. And that concludes my report back for the closed session. With that is 10:42, and I will call the meeting adjourned.